Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our meeting for Tuesday, August the 5th. Ms. Hilbrook, will you please call roll?
Yes, sir. Councilman De La Garza?
I am present.
Councilman Kidder?
Here.
Councilwoman Butler?
Present.
Councilwoman Scott?
Here.
Councilman Lofgren?
Here.
And Mayor Crocker.
Here. Dr. Young will not be joining
Will
us
not,
this evening, I
yes.
understand. Thank you. All right. If you would, please rise and join me in the pledges and a moment of silence. Thank you. Please be seated. Again, welcome everyone. We have a busy agenda this evening, and so we will jump right into announcements and reminders. Mr. Garza, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I do have quite a bit for you this evening, and so please bear with me. On behalf of Municipal Court, we want to remind the public that applications for the City of Victoria's Child Safety Grants Program for 2025-2026 will close on Friday, August 15th at 5 p.m. Information workshops for potential applicants will be held in the Municipal Court Chambers at 107 West Juan Lynn Street on Wednesdays, August 6th and 13th. For more information or to apply, please visit victoriatx.gov/Child Safety Program or contact Municipal Court Administrator Tiffany Toda at 361-485-3050. On behalf of the Mayor's office, yes, he has an office, high school juniors and seniors attending school in Victoria County with an interest in civic involvement can apply to serve on the Mayor's Youth Council for the upcoming school year. Applications for the 2025-2026 school year are due by August 31st with a letter of recommendation. For more information or to apply, visit victoriatx.gov/Youth Council or contact Special Projects Manager Keisha Smith at 361-485-3030. On behalf of the library and on behalf of the Friends of the Victoria Public Library, we invite the community to sign up for the 5K Storybook Fun Run that'll be held on Saturday, September 6th to help celebrate the library's 50th anniversary. The run starts at the Navy Museum and ends with a free block party in the library parking lot. Registration for the fun run starts at $15 per participant and includes your entry into the Storybook costume contest, activities, and treats on the race route, and a free t-shirt for those registered by August 15th. So do it for the t-shirt. For more information and to sign up or sponsor, visit friendsofvpl.com/events or victoriatx.gov/VPL50. In addition, on behalf of Public Works, we want to remind the public that on August 12th, we will switch back to chloramines. This is an annual disinfectant process that we began early this year in response to the boil water notice. Residents will likely not notice a major difference in their water quality or taste, I should say, but that is possible. Dialysis patients may need to change their pretreatment schemes for their dialysis machines, and anyone conditioning water for fish or aquariums may need to change their pretreatment processes as well. And we, of course, have put out this notice the way that we have done every year leading up to finishing that chlorine conversion. And lastly, some exciting news that we made public today is, of course, some promotions. Of course, you know that these promotions were actually announced internally early last month, but now the world knows. And so hopefully you saw those announcements today. And so I'm happy to announce publicly, of course, that Gilbert P. Reyna Jr., our CFO, was promoted to Assistant City Manager, as well as Daryl Lisak, who of course is our was our Environmental Services Director. Both, of course, have a lot of years of experience with us, and in addition, or aside from that, a proven track record. And ultimately, I think it speaks volumes to the work that they've done in our organization that has enhanced livability and has really improved their respective operations. And so I'm very excited that both have accepted the challenge to become assistant city managers. And so congratulations, guys. Thank you. with Daryl's promotion to Assistant City Manager, that of course opened up the Director of Environmental Services slot. And of course, that was an easy decision. Christy Euchre was promoted to Director of Environmental Services. She of course had been with us for a few years now, and was probably pushing Daryl out so that she could have the opportunity to step up. And so very excited that we were able to promote Christy. In addition, we promoted Greg Rodriguez to Public Works Assistant Director. This was in anticipation, of course, of what is being proposed in the budget, because we want to make sure that Public Works is put in a great position from a succession planning standpoint, which I'll speak to later in the budget presentation. But Greg has been with us for a few years now as well, and he certainly has earned the opportunity to become Assistant Director, much of which was actually highlighted during the boil water notice. He really stepped up and really led us through that effort. And so congratulations to Greg and to Christy for their promotions as well. And that's all I have for this evening, Mayor.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Garza. So then we will move on then to public and employee recognitions. And first up, we have a Farmers Market Week proclamation. Ms. Hilberg.
Yes, sir. Whereas Victoria Farmers and Ranchers provide citizens with access to healthful, locally and regionally produced foods through farmers markets, which are expanding and evolving to accommodate the demand for a diverse array of agricultural products. And whereas farmers markets and other agricultural direct marketing outlets provide infrastructure to assist in the distribution of farm and value-added products, thereby contributing approximately $9 billion each year to the U.S. economy, and whereas farmers markets serve as significant outlets by which small to medium, new and beginning, and veteran agricultural producers market agricultural products, generating revenue that supports the sustainability of family farms and the revitalization of rural communities nationwide. And whereas the Victoria City Council recognizes the importance of expanding agriculture marketing opportunities that assist and encourage the next generation of farmers and ranchers, generate farm income to help stimulate business development and job creation, build community connections through rural and urban linkages, and more, whereas the Victoria Farmers Market has been in operation for over 35 years, including 9 years as an official program of the Food Bank of the Golden Crescent, promoting unprecedented growth in the market, as well as an increased access to fresh, locally grown and produced foods for people of the greater Victoria area. Whereas the Victoria Farmers Market supports nearly 80 local farmers, food producers, and small businesses from throughout South Texas, providing a year-round opportunity for those to sell their wares to the public. Now therefore I, Dwayne Crocker, Mayor of the City of Victoria, do hereby proclaim the week of August 3rd through 9th, 2025 as Victoria Farmers Market Week in Victoria, Texas, to further make aware the farmers market's contributions to our lives in conjunction with the observance of National Farmers Market Week. I call upon Victoria citizens to celebrate farmers markets with appropriate observance and activities.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I did want to speak for just a moment on the Victoria Farmers Market. So tonight I'm here in my official capacity as Community Engagement Director for the Food Bank of the Golden Crescent and Victoria Farmers Market Manager. As Ms. Hilbrick read, the Victoria Farmers Market has been under the umbrella of the Food Bank since the end of 2015. So we're coming up on our 10th year. We are currently supporting nearly 80 local farms and small businesses, mostly from Victoria County, but we also have vendors who come in from DeWitt, Jackson, Goliad, Calhoun, Lavaca, and as far away as Wharton, Colorado, Aransas, and Nueces counties. This farmers market is open twice a week, all year round, every Wednesday, every Saturday. That is over 100 opportunities each year for these vendors to sell their products. We are a producers-only market, which means you are not allowed to buy wholesale beef and turn around and pass it off as your own. If you grow it, raise it, or make it, then you are eligible to sell it at the farmers market. I'm proud to support younger farmers and homesteaders trying to get into the game because we are losing our farmers at a faster rate then we can replenish them. I think at last year, I think the average age of the American farmer was 64. Don't quote me on that. But did someone say that's right?
It's got to be close.
And so it makes me happy to see some of the younger families getting into the game, producing their own foods, and seeing this market as an avenue to support their families and make money and provide their community with fresh foods. November will be 2 years that we started accepting SNAP at the market. This is formerly known as food stamps. And in under 2 years, we've already run $10,000 in SNAP transactions. We actually just partnered up about a little over a month ago with a nonprofit out of Central Texas called the Sustainable Food Center, which has a program called Double Up Food Bucks that will match a customer's SNAP dollars at the market up to $30. That extra $30 per day, those extra vouchers are only to be used on fresh fruits and vegetables. So it is to promote people shopping at the market for fresh produce. Of course, the way that SNAP works at the market is just like at the grocery store, where all of the eligible foods, the pickles, breads, eggs, honey, meats, all of that is eligible to be purchased using SNAP. So I'm very proud that we are becoming more accessible to our community and not being too expensive for some people who might not have the resources to spend money at the market. I'm really proud of us accepting SNAP and now Double Up Food Bucks. So I appreciate you guys listening to my spiel tonight and appreciate the proclamation. And if you'd ever like to come out and visit us, like I said, we're open every week on Wednesdays and Saturdays, and lots of friendly faces selling fresh foods. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Berg. So then let's move to item B2B, which is our monthly Keep Victoria Beautiful Award. Ms. Euchre. Welcome and congratulations on your promotion.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor and Council. And while I have the opportunity, I do want to say I'm very grateful for this new opportunity and to Daryl. Daryl's been a wonderful leader, supporter, and just great all-around friend to have working with these last 4 years. And I thought I would miss hearing him from across the hall. But then I realized I don't think I will, because, you know, he's going to be down the street, and we all know Daryl's voice projects. So I thought, you know, I will still hear him, so that's a good thing. Okay, so I am here to present our Beautification Award, and I've got Kim McGill, who is a Keep Victoria Beautiful board member, who's going to do the honors.
Hi, welcome, Ms. McGill.
Hello. Good evening, Mayor and City Councilman. On behalf of Keep Victoria Beautiful, I am honored to present the award to Eden Yackland, property manager of Heritage Mark Building. We honor them because they are not just a structure of brick and mortar, but a symbol of pride, care, and thoughtful design, one that reflects the values we hold dear in the community: beauty, sustainability, accessibility, and a sense of belonging. This building was built in 1982, and they were actually one of our first recipients of our awards. They have gone above and beyond in creating a welcoming and attractive environment, from its well-maintained landscaping and clean, inviting exterior to the way it seamlessly fits into the busiest street we call Navarro. This place doesn't just stand there, it belongs there. Congratulations, and thank you for making our city a better place to be.
Gosh, Mayor and Councilman, she said it all, except for just a little bit. We are so excited to receive this, the staff and the owner of Heritage Mark, because we try really, really hard to make Heritage Mark a great place to be, not just the building and the property, but everything that you don't see, the perks and amenities for our clients, the wonderful Christmas breakfast that we have, the fruit-infused water in the break rooms, wine tastings after 5, of course, And we just want Heritage Mark to be a great place, not only for our clients, but for our clients' clients to come to. We do have room for one more business to come join the Heritage Mark community. We have one suite available that's 1,500 square feet, and that last business will make us 100% occupied, and we truly believe we are Victoria's best address. Thank you.
Congratulations. All right, moving on then, we'll move to items from council. Ms. Scott, I believe you had an item?
Yes, it's more a shout out than anything, but I want to call attention to the hike and bike trail at the place that it crosses John Stockbauer, south of Mockingbird and north of Ben Jordan. And if you're not familiar with that intersection or where it crosses, it's because it's kind of hard to see. And about 9 years ago, I think, or maybe a little less, we did install a median, which helped, and that was done locally. Our folks did it. But I definitely want to put a strong shout out to our Public Works Department for what they've done in the last, I'm not sure, maybe in the last couple weeks. You might have noticed it, but there are flashing lights now that pedestrians can utilize. It is bright, it is very visible, and it's a great addition. And I want to especially thank Roland Rodriguez and also Roberto Zarate and the entire traffic department, because not only is it, I think it's beautifully designed and really works well, but it's wonderfully installed and it was done locally, so, or done in-house, I guess. So I just really want to shout out and thank them. I do want to remind anybody using that intersection that you don't have the right of way. Just because the lights are flashing doesn't mean cars have to stop. So please be responsible, look both ways and be careful. But we've done what we can to light it up so that people know you're there. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Are there any other items? Okay, I had one real quick. I just wanted to give everyone an update on our Water System Review Subcommittee and take an opportunity just to update residents and the council on the work of the subcommittee that was formed at our last meeting. So we are meeting weekly. We have made good progress towards our goal, which is to identify the root cause of the boil water incident back in July, and as well as identify any needed improvements, whether they be to processes, to equipment, to infrastructure. And so we've set the scope of the work to encompass all of these things. There have been some operational changes that have already been implemented by staff, including a more frequent water testing schedule. So details of short-term changes, long-term recommendations will be included in a written report that the subcommittee is continuing to work on. So the scope of work of the committee is geared toward an ultimate goal, which is more than just a boil water notice review. The ultimate goal is an overall improved water system for the city itself. And we hope that that will be the result of this process. And we'll continue to work towards that objective as expeditiously as possible, given the scope of the work. So stay tuned, and there's more to come on that. All right. Then we will jump then to citizens communication. I have one card, and it is from Michael Vondero. Good evening, Mr. Vondero.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Michael Vondero. I live at 2107 North Ben Jordan. I'd like to thank the City of Victoria for taking care of the issues and with the water, and Attorney Crocker for putting that subcommittee meeting together. And TRLA is Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid Society. They're giving free legal advice at the Salvation Army from 6 to 8 on August 11th, 6 to 8 p.m. if anyone needs some free legal help. And also on 2204 East North Street and 2210 East North Street, Victoria Oaks Trailer park. There's a whole bunch of branches all over the sidewalk. There's furniture on the sidewalk. There's a water meter cover off. There's a big trench that's right by the sidewalk, and I've been complaining for it for months and months, and the personal injury lawyer does when he does best, and it's nothing. He turned a blind eye to it, and his management team and Liberty Real Estate Partners have done nothing. The community managers have done nothing. The plumbers have done nothing at Sunshine Plumbing and El Campo, and school's going to be starting. And people, they ride their bicycles, to school. It's a low-income area. I was riding my bicycle up here, and a whole bunch of banana tree branches slapped me in the face as I was riding my bike, and they still refused to take care of it. Yet they increased the rent from $410 to $485, $75 extra. That's to pay for the concrete. And they increase rent, but in return, you get no service. There's mailboxes that's all over the place, falling apart. No lids to the mailboxes. On trailer 29, it needs to be crushed. There's toilet in the front, furniture, broken windows, vandalism, and where they poured the concrete, they're not even putting no dirt on the side. You could fall off the concrete. One tenant also had a branch fall on his tree. They want the tenants to take care of the trees, not the trailer park management like they're supposed to. And it's just a mess, and I wish the personal injury lawyer would take care of it. I actually went to talk to him about it, but I only got to talk to the paralegal. It wasn't sanctioned by the city of Victoria. I did that on my own. But, he's winning these multi-million-dollar cases, $80 million in investments. Sometimes he gets 40% of the winnings on his multi-million-dollar cases and still no help. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Von All right, then we will move then to section C, items with public hearings. We'll begin with item C1. Ms. Hilbert?
Item C1 is an ordinance of the City of Victoria, Texas, ordering a special election on November 4th, 2025, for the purpose of submitting to the voters the questions of whether Chapter 143 of the Texas Local Government Code, Civil Service, should be adopted for the Victoria Fire Department, and whether Chapter 174 of the Texas Local Government Code, Collective Bargaining, should be adopted for the Victoria Fire Department, making provision for the conduct of the election and resolving other matters incident to such election.
All right, my turn.
Your turn, Mr. Garza.
My turn. Una ordenanza de la ciudad de Victoria, Texas, por la que se convoca una elección especial el 4 de noviembre del 2025 con el fin de someter a votación popular las siguientes preguntas. Si debe adoptarse el capítulo 143 del Código de Gobierno Local de Texas, Función Pública, para el Departamento de Bomberos de Victoria, y se debe adoptarse el capítulo 174 del Código de Gobierno Local de Texas, Negociación Colectiva, para el Departamento de Bomberos de Victoria, estableciendo disposiciones para la celebración de las elecciones y resolviendo otras preguntas relacionadas con dichas elecciones.
Hilbert.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I would like to state that this item is on emergency reading because we have to call the election 74 days before the election, so we're trying to meet that timeline. The Victoria Firefighters Association presented petitions under Chapter 143 and Chapter 174 of the Texas Local Government Code seeking an election to allow voters to consider approving the civil service and collective bargaining sections of those chapters for specifically the Victoria Fire Department. After verifying the required elements in the petition according to Chapter 277 of the Texas Elections Code and the required number of signatures from the two sections of the respective local government code, the petitions were deemed to have met the special election, or the requirements, and the ordinance before you tonight orders a special election on Tuesday, November 4th, 2025, to allow voters to consider approving the civil service and collective bargaining specifically for the Victoria Fire Department.
Ms. Hilbert, before we take any further, thank you and your staff. I know that was a lot of work going through and verifying those, and so
Yes,
thank
sir.
you for
Thank you. I
thank you for
appreciate
taking care of that for us. We
Yes,
appreciate
sir.
it.
I appreciate that.
Are there any questions for Ms. Hilbert before we open the hearing? Okay. With that then, I will open a public hearing on item C1. If there's anyone here who wishes to address council on this item, please come forward. Seeing no one, then I will close the hearing on item C1 and entertain any motions.
Motion to approve item C1.
We've got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. C1 passes. Moving then to our second public hearing, which is item C2.
Item C2 is a resolution approving and adopting the Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG, 2025 through 2029 Consolidated Plan, 2025 through 2026 Annual Action Plan, the Analysis of Impediments and Citizen Participation Plan, and authorize the city manager to submit all required documentation for fiscal year 2025-2026 CDBG program to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Good evening, Mr. Winner. Welcome.
Thank you, City Council and Mayor. This evening, we are going over the 2025 to 2029 Community Development Block Grant Consolidated Plan. It's a 5-year plan, and the Annual Action Plan for 2025. This will be final approval and adoption. Oops, I went back. Oh, I went back. All right, so the Consolidated Plan, it's a 5-year plan that we have to submit to HUD. Identifies our housing and community development needs within the city's low to moderate income communities, and it outlines how we're going to address those identified needs. So there's a bunch of elements that make up the consolidated plan. As you can see, we have citizen participation plan, housing market analysis, housing and homeless need assessment, analysis of impediments, monitoring plan, required certifications, strategic plan, and an annual action plan. Specifically pointing out the analysis of impediments that identifies and assesses our impediments for fair housing here in Victoria. And so what we did is we updated with new census data, most current data, we updated that one that we had previously created 5 years ago. And as well with the citizen participation plan, just went through that, making sure we have things in place to make sure we have as much participation in our plans as possible from the community. And so some of our goals for the consolidated plan, we are going to continue to monitor, plan, and administer the entitlement grant programs and ensure compliance with federal regulations. We'll enhance livability through public infrastructure and improvements such as streetlights and sidewalks and parks projects and CDBG eligible census block groups. Neighborhood programs, we will continue to do our demolition and clearance projects to address the unsafe structures there in those CDBG eligible areas. Affordable housing, we're going to assist low to moderate income first-time homebuyers with down payment closing cost assistance, as well as home rehab to preserve safe housing for our low to moderate income households. And then public facility goals, we will continue to support renovations and improvements to community facility providers and to facilities that serve special needs populations. For example, homeless, centers that help with the homeless, centers that help with food banks, youth centers, things like that. And then for our public services, we're going to continue to support public service activities that provide essential services to persons who are low to moderate income within the city of Victoria or may have special needs such as subsistence support services, child and youth services, employment job training services, mental health, wellness services, homeless, at-risk homeless prevention services, and senior and or disabled adult services, and services for abused and neglected children. So those are our big overarching goals for the 2025-2029 consolidated plan. And so then with our budgeting, we have to estimate how much we will get each year. So we did get an appropriation for $537,925 for this upcoming program year, which will start October 1st and run through September 30th, 2026. And we did project out about $525,000 for the next couple of program years. We have been keeping an eye on the appropriations committees And it looks like they're gaining traction not to get rid of CDBG, but we're keeping a close eye on that and seeing how that's going to go. So we do have money for this coming year. We're still waiting to see for 2026, though, which would be fiscal year 2027. Okay, and then we go into the annual action plan. So the specifics of what we're going to do to reach those goals that we just discussed. All right, so as I said, we will receive $537,925 in entitlement funding. For the fiscal year 26, we will be reprogramming unallocated funds from previous program years in the amount of $57,939.24 for a total budget of $595,864.24. And this will begin October 1st, 2025. That's when that program year will begin. And so we'll have, for administration, we have a 20% cap on our entitlement. We cannot go over that 20% cap. So we have $107,000 in administration. Affordable housing, that will be a city activity that we will be collaborating with the Golden Crescent Habitat for Humanity to help install ADA compliant ramps to homes that qualify as low to moderate income households, and also disabled adults and or the elderly. And this will help make sure that they can stay in their homes and they don't have to leave, and that they can, that their homes are more affordable since they can stay there. And then we will have our demolition program, $62,000 put towards that. Our unallocated funds we're gonna put towards a sidewalk project in one of the eligible CDBG areas. We're not sure yet where, but we will come back to y'all when we have that more specific location. And then for public facilities, we're gonna budget $195,000, and for public service, that's the part of the budget that's capped at 15%, and that's set by HUD, and we can't spend over that, so we can only spend $80,500 on that. And so that makes up our budget. This is the low to moderate income limits for the upcoming year, program year. This is set by HUD as well, so this is how we qualify people as low to moderate income. So essentially, as long as they fall below that 80%, depending on their household size, that's how we qualify them as low to moderate income. And that's for every individual in the household over 18 that brings in income, gross income. And then our 2024 low to moderate income block groups, we've had a change as of August 1st of this year, or this past year, 2024. I get my years mixed up, but we have a little bit of movement in low to moderate income block groups. So we'll have our demolition and clearance program that can demolish and clear substandard home structures in those areas, as well as the sidewalk project. Once we, like I said, once we come back with specifically where we're gonna do that, it will be within one of these low to moderate income block group areas. And then this is a snapshot of the process to get nonprofits and local agencies qualified for our program. So we announced the application process back in February 2025. We held a workshop on March 5th where we went over all the CDBG rules and regulations and application process with the local agencies who were interested in applying for CDBG. We had application review from May 1st through May 16th. We brought funding recommendations to y'all on June 3rd. Public comment period on the draft plan was July 3rd up until August 4th. And then we are at the public hearing for the approval of the con plan and annual action plan. And then after tonight's meeting, we will submit to HUD by August 16th, but as soon as I get approval, I will be working really hard to make sure we get it in by Friday. So, and then after that, after we get approval from HUD, I'll start reaching out to the subrecipients, setting up their agreements, and then funding will become available for reimbursement for subrecipients starting October 1st through September 30th, 2026. And then for our public facilities, this year we are having, so we're gonna have one public facility this coming year. It's gonna be Victoria Housing Authority, excuse me. Their exterior painting and window replacement for their Fillmore apartments. Unfortunately, this year, Boys and Girls Club, their census block group was not within one of the eligible areas, so we were not able to fund them. And then for our public services, this is our hardest ones to to go through because as you can see at the bottom of this chart, we had an ask of $128,453, and we had to reduce that down to the $80,500 because of that 15% cap that HUD sets on the entitlements. So for public services, we will be granting out to Billy Ticatan for their behavioral interventions. Boys and Girls Club, we'll be assisting their after-school / summer camp. Crossroads Community Action, formerly Crossroads, what was it? Lost my train of thought. Rental assistance for them. Food Bank of Golden Crescent, we're gonna help with their kids' weekend meal program. CASA, we're gonna help with Volunteer for Every Child in Need. Gulf Bend Center, their wellness community. Hospice of South Texas, that's one of our new subrecipients this coming year. We'll assist with their trauma care for victims of child abuse. Midcoast Family Services, there'll be a new PSA this year, but we have assisted them in the past with facilities. But this year we will be helping them fund a staff member in their resource hub to help those who come visit, get them in the right direction of what resources they need to go towards. And then Perpetual Help Home will be assisting with their resident management, and United Way of the Crossroads, their Community Connections project. So the important dates, again, we had our public comment period from July 3rd, 2025 through August 4th, 2025. And we are having our public hearing and final approval tonight. And then, as I said before, we have a deadline to submit the consolidated plan, citizen participation plan, annual action plan, and all other documents by August 16th, but we do anticipate on submitting that a week before, so. If you have any questions?
Any questions? The one question I had on the sidewalk projects, are those limited to primarily residential areas? I would assume through this program, or are they just within those designated areas
Within those
themselves?
designated areas.
Got it. Okay. All right, any questions? All right, thank you to you and your team. I know this is a lot of work and going through this, and we certainly appreciate you putting all that together, and thank you for the information this evening. So with that then, I will open up the public hearing on item C2. Anyone wishing to address council on this matter, please come forward. Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and entertain any motions with respect to item C2.
Motion to approve and adopt item C2.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And item C2 passes. All right, moving to the consent agenda. Ms. Hilbert.
Yes, sir. Item D1 is the adoption of minutes of the regular meeting held on July 15, 2025. Item D2 is an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Victoria, Texas, amending Chapter 8, Finance and Taxation of the city's Code of Ordinances to add a new article, Article 4, Short-Term Motor Vehicle Rental Tax, to reflect the adoption of the short-term motor vehicle rental tax within the city to fund an approved venue project as approved by the voters in the May 3rd, 2025 special election, providing for the incorporation of premises, providing for an amendment, providing a cumulative repealer clause, providing a severability clause, providing a penalty clause, providing for publication, and providing an effective date. This item is on second and third reading. Item D3 is an ordinance vacating, closing, and abandoning of .13 acres of public right-of-way known as East Dayton Avenue located between Block 164, Block 165, and GH and SA Railroad right-of-way within the original town site of Victoria in response to the petition of 100% of the adjoining landowners. Item is on second and third reading. Item D4 is a resolution appointing Wesley Janashek, CPA, as a representative to perform the no new revenue or effective tax rate in the voter-approved or rollback tax rate calculations. Item D5 is a resolution approving a contract amendment with Tyler Technologies Incorporated for the Tyler Munis ERP system, increasing the estimated amount from $2,280,982 to $2,306,754. Item D6 is a resolution authorizing the publication of the notice of meeting to vote on the tax rate. Item D7 is a resolution scheduling the public hearings on the fiscal year 2025-2026 proposed budget. Item D8 is a resolution approving the professional services agreement with Gary Middleton for representation and consultation services related to the municipal water supply in the amount of $24,000. Item D9 is a resolution approving an interlocal agreement with the Golden Crescent Regional Planning Commission for E911 public answering point services. Item D10 is a resolution awarding the 2025 sanitary sewer cleaning project to All Points Inspection Services Incorporated for the amount of $139,413.62. Item D11 is a resolution awarding the Avenue D Power Avenue Sanitary Sewer Rehabilitation Project to Ramrod Utilities LLC in amount of $290,777. Item D12 is a resolution approving change order number 6 to the Duck Pond Renovation Project with Lester Contracting Incorporated in the amount of $155,573.60. And item D13 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to negotiate the terms of the professional services agreement with AGCM Incorporated for owners' representation services in connection with the expansion of the community center.
Thank you, Ms. Hilbert. Do I have any motions with respect to the consent agenda?
To approve the consent agenda as read.
I'd second it.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And consent agenda passes. So we will jump then to action items from council, and we'll begin with item E1.
Item E1 is a resolution considering an appeal of the Building Standards Commission's order to demolish the structure at 2606 Port Lavaca Drive.
Good evening, Ms. Fulgham.
Good evening. So this property first got on code enforcement's radar back in April because of vagrant activity. When code enforcement performed their inspections, they realized that this building was really on the verge of basically becoming to a point where it would not be able to be rehabbed. As such, they sent notice to the property owners and asked for repairs, but did still want to take it to the Building Standards Commission to actually secure an order of repair. The property owner pulled a permit in July for the roof, exterior windows, and overall general repairs, although that permit did not include permits for the mechanical, electrical, or plumbing systems. At the July 22nd Building Standards Commission meeting, the board or the commission really discussed the vagrant activity and the fact that this was property was an attractive nuisance, and declared that the property, or made a motion that the property was unsafe. After the board declares or makes a motion that a property is unsafe, then they have to determine whether the property is more than or less than 50% of its value. It remains. The commission determined that there was more than 50% of the value had been damaged, or the building was in deterioration, and therefore an automatic demolition order was issued. Sorry. So what is wrong with this building? As you can see, it's a pretty standard commercial shell. The roof is severely deteriorated. A lot of the evidence of deterioration really is clear on the interior pictures that they, of course, received an administrative warrant to inspect. So the systems, of course, are gone. The roof is severely deteriorated. It's past its useful life, and it is allowing water to infiltrate the building. However, the concrete block walls so far are still in marginal shape. There is not really evidence of large cracking, except in a very few spaces in the interior of the building. And so that's why, like I said, code enforcement really felt this building was on the verge and did recommend an original order of repair. And so this is, like I said, this is the evidence of cracking that you see, but for the most part, a new roof, completely cleaning the building out, and new systems could easily preserve the foundational walls of the building. So it is really, could kind of go either way. If left in this condition, it absolutely will deteriorate to the point of no return. For those reasons, I believe the property owner appealed the order, and they are here to address the council if you'd like.
Okay. Is there any questions for Ms. Fulgham on that?
I would like to ask, do you know when the last tenant was that was in this building?
No, I do not, but the property owner may be able to answer that question.
Okay. Yeah. Are you here to address council on this? Yes, sir. Yeah, please come forward. Thank you.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. First of all, thank you for accepting our appeal. I just wanted to say, I'm the owner's son. I'm representing my father. We're fully committed to addressing all the deficiencies in the building to ensure that it's full compliance and applicable to the city codes and regulations. Our team is prepared. My father and a general contractor out of Houston, Texas, were the ones who pulled that permit. We're kind of just gathering all the material and things like that to get all the work done. It is, obviously the contractors are from Houston, so there's a bit of commute, so he's trying to figure out all the logistics. But ever since we got the notice of the demolition or we saw it, that's when like it just kind of paused. The work kind of paused until the day we showed up today. We kind of just, to ensure the highest quality of work and thorough resolution, we just respectfully and request like a 30-day period to complete all the necessary repairs. We are in the process of, like she said, the mechanical and the electrical issues that there are there. We do have a plan for it. We have talked to the general contractor to pull those permits also. So we are willing to, like I said, fully commit and address all the deficiencies. If we can get some time, I think we can get the building back in order.
And based on what I saw there, I got to be honest with you, I question whether or not you can get this back in a stable condition within that 30-day window. What's your confidence level on that being achievable? What's your contractor telling you?
I mean, he says he can get it done. I mean, then again, he is a general contractor, so I mean, give or take. We deal with them all the time, so that's just, some more time would be best, but I mean, 30 days, we can try to at least get an update and see where we're at. I think we can get a lot of this stuff done, like the minor stuff done pretty quickly. I mean, it's not that big of a building, like the roof and the windows and things like that can be addressed pretty quickly.
Okay. Mr. Kidder, did you want to ask your question? Yeah.
If I may, thank you.
Sure.
When was the last tenant, when was the building last occupied?
It could be over 3 or 4 years at least.
And if you do get it rehabilitated, what would be the future use of the building?
We've talked to a couple of local, I guess, citizens that we know that they're willing to work out a deal to maybe purchase the property at whole or lease it. But we're just not exactly sure what their purpose would be with the building.
And how long has your father owned the building?
4 or 5 years? About 4 or 5 years at least.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if this has to do with, we had another partner living in Victoria. He was the one who was managing the property and things like that. And then he kind of basically left it there and he didn't do his job. So we kind of have to do it from Houston. So it's a little difficult, but we're willing to take care of the project.
Yes.
What's the square footage of the building?
It's like about 1,000 to 1,200, less than 1,000 square feet. About 1,200 square feet, I would say.
Are there any other questions? All right, thank you. So, I guess our options here, and Ms. Boone, you can weigh in on this. Our options here are either to take action on this. We could table this for a 30-day period of time and see if it could come back and do the work that you're saying that you can get done in that time and take it back up at that point, or place whatever condition I think we may want to on there. So those are all options that are on the table, and so
Who said the 30-day period? They did?
yes.
Mayor, if I may.
Yes, Ms. Boone, thank you.
Yes, I would say, either, you can table it, but there are some other options. You can uphold the Building and Standards Commission's demolition order, or you can reverse their order. And essentially reversing their order, this building could go back to the Building and Standards Commission in October at their next meeting for them to consider again. So that's another option as well.
Have we also, in the past, kind of upheld the order, but given an extension of time before we would go into the demolition phase? Or something like that, is that?
It's a little bit more clear if we either table or make a decision to uphold or reverse the order.
Okay, so it's more clear if we table or vacate or reverse without condition.
Table, uphold the order, or reverse the order.
Okay.
Ms. Fulgham, can I ask a question? So if we were to table this today to give that 30-day period, I'm assuming that you guys could still do your inspections in the interim, come back during that 30, or at the end of that 30 days and say the work's been done or not done, or it's now a stable building?
Right. And to make it not substandard, it doesn't necessarily have to have a certificate of occupancy and be occupied. So what we would really be looking for is the roof to be completely rebuilt so that it functions as a roof and doesn't let water infiltrate. Those structural cracks that are minor at this point be repaired so that they don't become major, and then just generally cleaning up and cleaning out the entire property, and then of course making sure that the storefront is rebuilt and repaired so that it cannot become it's not an attractive nuisance anymore, inviting vagrants and whatnot. So to, like I said, make it not substandard. It doesn't necessarily have to have the full HVAC and electrical and everything done that would open the doors to give it a certificate of occupancy.
Okay. So just looking real quick, this is just as an FYI, our next meeting is going to be, or not next meeting, the meeting after that is going to be, nope, that's not it. September 2nd, which would put us inside of the 30 days, and the meeting after that would be the 16th, which would actually give an extra week or two in there if we chose to table. So I just want to make sure everybody.
And do we have another meeting because of the tax rate? Is there
On the ninth.
September 9th?
On the 9th, I believe.
The 9th.
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
It was about a year ago we had a situation like that.
Yeah.
Do we create any barriers with tabling it, Ruby or Julie? Do we create any barriers for the owner as far as permits or progress with just tabling it the 30 days?
No, staff can continue to work with them during that period.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we did originally recommend that this building be repaired. We do feel like it can be repaired, but if it continues in its current state, it won't be able to be repaired. So if in 30 days nothing's been done and it continues, then obviously we would be seeking it to be demolished because we want to see this building be repaired or go away. A choice is made rather than just letting it continue as is.
And the permit, did I understand correctly, the permit for the work
Yes,
has
it's
already
been
been
issued.
issued? Okay, okay.
I think, part of my thought process on it, though, is I'd like to see it repaired, but I'd like to see it repaired to the point that it could be used, not repaired to the point that it no longer should be demolished. If we're going to end up with a vacant building that's just going to continue, potentially deteriorate further, I mean, my assumption is that they would renovate it and be able to then have it used.
I don't know that our code has to be used. I think as long as they get past the minimum standards, then at that point, I think you let the market dictate use because these
Right.
gentlemen have the incentive to put it in a condition that can be used so they can rent it out or sell it, so.
I think it's just, seeing the tags on it makes me think, okay, right now it's vacant. Well, it could be renovated and still be vacant.
I think there's only
but
so
you're
much we
right.
can do,
Yeah.
to be honest with you.
There will be a considerable cost to get it out of its substandard condition.
And I would think
Okay.
that once you sunk that cost into it, you're going to go ahead and get it in a condition you can do something with, would make sense to me.
That would also be my hope.
Okay.
Okay. So, I'm looking for a motion.
So I move we table this for at least 30 days,
Okay.
Until which meeting?
September 9th.
I second that.
Okay, so we've got a motion to table this matter until our special meeting, I believe, on September 9th.
And before we vote, could we ask the property owner if that works for them? I think it does, but before we,
Sorry. Yeah, that definitely works for us. And like where you guys were mentioning about putting it back in order for use. So that's basically the plan. So the leasee, if we sign someone that's going to lease it, they would basically be taking the cost to put in the mechanical and the HVAC and things like that. Yeah.
Okay.
30 days just seems to be too short for me.
Seems too short to me, but when he comes back, if he's made progress, I think then we can.
We can revisit at that point.
Yeah,
So
we can
We can
revisit.
you've
reverse
got a
it.
window to move forward
Excellent.
is
I agree.
basically what the motion would do. So, all right.
Council, if I may add, you can also ask for a detailed plan at that time that might assist in your decision-making.
That's a good idea. Okay. All right, so we've got a motion, a second, to table this until our September 9th meeting. Is there any discussion on the motion to table? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. We appreciate it, and I hope you can get it back to where it needs to be.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, with that then, we will move on to item E2.
Item E2 is a resolution considering an appeal of the Building and Standards Commission's order to demolish the structure at 1205 East Santa Rosa Street.
Good evening.
Ms. Fulgrim?
So this property also went to the July 22nd Building Standards Commission meeting and was appealed. This property is in a little bit worse shape. It is a concrete block structure on the first floor with a wooden structure on the second floor. And there are major structural failures throughout that really probably is best told through photographs. So as you can see from the exterior, there's a lot of vegetation covering the building, but there are a lot of holes in the siding that is exposing the entire roof and upper area to, weather. And those holes exist throughout all of that. Fascia and soffit boards are completely almost rotted through. There's quite a few structural cracking evidence just throughout the entire building. These large cracks are particularly worrisome and basically show how far gone the building really is. This building also has had fire damage, which you'll see a little bit evidence on the inside. Here's some more structural cracks in a different location. The structural cracks are really throughout every single facade, every single side of this building, north, south, east, and west. And then the wood rot exists also almost exclusively throughout the building in all windows and trim boards and holes in the roof. Here's the interior. So there's not really a lot of value inside with finishes. A lot of it is in this gutted state. It doesn't appear to have ever had any modern conveniences like modern wiring, a lot of the knob and tube. So interior rot, because of course huge portions are exposed to all the elements because of the roof. As well as those cracks also let moisture seep through. So it's essentially open to the elements and is really an environment that accelerates wood rot. So staff definitely concurred with the Building Standards Commission motion in order that this building is unsafe and over 50% of its value has deteriorated, and do recommend upholding the Building and Standards Commission order for this property.
Okay. Are there any questions for Ms. Fulgrim?
On the documents that you provided, there were two owners of two different names. So there was an owner and then someone else, but then there was another owner listed as well, and I could go
Yes.
back and look.
Yes, so there was an owner and another interested party that attended the meeting and spoke, but there was another owner on the title report that was provided all of the notice that actually submitted the appeal letter.
Is there anybody to speak to this here today?
Not sure.
Have they submitted a plan or any type of, just the appeal? Just these words?
They had spoke at the meeting that they had a plan to secure a loan to do the repairs. But the repairs are really extensive. When a building gets to this point, it's really easier just to start over.
So we saw the pictures of the cracks in the concrete wall. What was the foundation like?
I'll have to call Rick up. Is it what kind of foundation is it?
So it's difficult to tell on a concrete slab what the foundation looks like, but those are signs that that's major foundation failure when you get cracks of that sort.
I think the pictures are pretty clear that this one's pretty far gone. So,
What are our options now?
I'm sorry?
What are our options now?
I think our options would pretty much be the same. Ms. Boone?
Yes, to a motion to uphold the building and standards demolition order or reverse their order.
I move we uphold their order.
Second.
Right, I've got a motion and a second to uphold the order of the Building and Standards Commission. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the motion passes. All right, we are going to jump over item E3 and go to our city manager's reports. Mr. Garza has a couple of reports for us, so I will turn it over to you.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. I actually have two separate presentations for you this evening. Usually, we present the certified tax roll as part of the presentation of the budget. However, I felt that this year in particular, it would be best to separate those out so that I can show you just some additional graphs and just have some additional conversation specific to the certified tax roll before we even get to the budget side of the equation. I wanted to start off by just reminding you that values all across the state are being impacted. Communities across the state are seeing a plateau or a reduction in property values. It's putting cities in position to have to make cuts in their respective budgets. These are some headlines that we've seen just in the last few weeks. As I alluded to in June, we're a little bit safe from this type of needing to make major cuts due to our conservative budgeting approach, which I'll elaborate on during the budget presentation side of it. But I also wanted to start off this presentation with that same message because we're not immune to what's been going on across the state. And of course, what I mean by that is that decrease and plateauing of property values. And so you'll see highlighted in the red circle that our NTAV officially has decreased by 1.2%. And it is the first time in several years that we've seen a negative impact to our NTAV, and I'll show you a historical slide here shortly. I also want to spend a little bit of extra time hitting on the relationship between the residential values, which went down by 4.3%, and the commercial industrial values that went up by almost 3%. And I want to hit on this, what appears to be this crazy increase in exempt property. I don't have a slide for that other than to explain to you that that is a correction of the valuation of publicly owned properties. So Carrie herself actually reached out to me several months ago to give me a heads up about this. Of course, as public entities, city, county, school districts, we don't pay property taxes, but all of our facilities and properties are still given a value. And so those particular values had not been kept up with. And so this was a intentional correction on her part to adjust the value of exempt property primarily related to city, county, and school district owned properties. So that's why you see that major increase there. If you go all the way to the bottom, you'll see also a pretty substantial increase to the value within our tax increment reinvestment zone. And so I have a couple of slides that take a deeper dive into that as well. I want to start off by just providing a global view on the history of our taxable appraised values. This shows the values growing over time. And you can see how over the last 6 years, we've seen an increase of almost 50% in those values. And so obviously, there's been an intentional, whether intentional or not, there's been a increase in values that we've all benefited from over the last 5 years, which are a little bit easier to see in this slide. This goes all the way to 2010 because I thought it would be prudent and appropriate to just show you the history of our property values and specifically about how they ebb and flow depending on what's going on. And so as an example, I wasn't here for this, but many of you recall the impact of the Eagle Ford shell and all of that movement that happened between 2012 and 2015. And so you start to see a little bit of that impact there. Of course, you see what happened in 2018 after Harvey. That is common, right? After any kind of natural disaster, a community normally does see a decrease in values. And I want you to remember what happened in 2018 because I'm going to reference that later in a different slide. But you see the drastic increases in values that occurred in 21 through 24. And that's what is driving the fact that over the last 5 or 6 years, we've seen that major increase in our net taxable appraised values. Now, we know that that was caused through a number of, or by a number of factors, ranging from, inflation that was caused by disruptions caused by the pandemic. We know that there was low interest rates at the time, which of course facilitated growth. We know that there was a lot of stimulus funds that was circulating in the economy that also stemmed from the pandemic. And so there was just a lot of things that were happening at the same time that caused, of course, market values to go up in real estate, right? We all saw that happen. And of course, there's a direct correlation between real estate market value and assessed value. And so that's what drove a lot of that up. And so what we're seeing now, of course, is just the reality that that was not going to be sustainable long term. And we're seeing it in market values, right? We're seeing that the cost of homes, for example, is beginning to go down. It's becoming a buyer's market, right? And so things are just changing in the real estate world. And so consequently, that's being impacted by the assessed values as well. One of the things that I'd like to also point out from a historical standpoint is that some of you may recall back in 2020 that we started to bring to light that there was this diversion that was taking place between residential values and commercial values. It's hard to see in this graph, but it was happening between 2016 and 2020, and that's better, oops, sorry, wrong way. And you can better see that here, how between 2016 and 2020, we saw an increase in residential values of 9%, and during that same time frame, we saw a reduction in the commercial and industrial by 4%. And so that's that separation that I'm referring to. And some of you may recall me verbalizing 5 years ago that normally those things go up and down together. And whenever they're not, it's a sign of something's going on. And so that's when there was a lot of conversation around evaluating the appraisal district. Some of that also was as a result of the redundancy study that we conducted in 2020 that also very specifically outlined some discrepancies in the valuations of commercial properties, specifically in the downtown area. And so there were just a lot of questions that were being asked of the appraisal district in that 2020 timeframe because of what the data was telling us. And of course, as I mentioned, we had the pandemic, which caused values to go up. And so you can see, if I go back to this, that both commercial and residential were going up. They were trending together between 2020 and 2024, or 2023, I should say, and 2024, sorry. They started to trend up together, is where I'm getting at. And now for 2025, you're beginning to see what I described, which is a negative or a reduction in residential and an increase in commercial. And so all in all, between 2020 and 2025, you see that residential has gone up 29% and commercial has gone up 68%. And so whether intentional or not, there's been this correction, if you will, values that has taken place over the last 5 years. And to some extent, some might argue is continuing to happen in 2025. One of the things that also I think is important to understand is the relationship between new improvements and ongoing values. And so as an example, currently for 2025, this is the value for new improvements, which is actually the second lowest mark that we've had in 10 years. And so that speaks to the stabilization of the market, that speaks to the fact that growth is not taking place, or was not last year at least. And it just speaks to the status of why our NTAV is where it's at. And obviously sets the foundation for the conversation that we need to have on the tax rate. One thing I'll note is that similar to a previous slide, this also tells us kind of when things were growing. And so this doesn't go past 2016, but if I were to show you a few additional years, you would see that there was some new improvements that were at a pretty healthy clip in that 2014, 15, 16 timeframe, which again could be attributed to the Eagle Ford Shale movement that we were seeing at the time. Then of course you see the dip in 2019, which could be attributed to also a post-Harvey kind of impact on the environment. And then you see the 2023 go up significantly, which again is a result of low interest rates, stimulus funds, so many different things that were going on in that time. And of course now things are plateauing. Remember that in 2019 was the lowest figure for new improvements, because I'm going to come back to that as well. And so part of what I want you to keep also front and center as we continue our conversation on values and tax rate is that unfortunately for 2025, we have a double whammy effect. And so not only do we have a negative NTAV, but we also have the second lowest value for new improvements. And so keep that in mind as we continue our conversation, because no other year did we experience that double dip, or that double whammy, if you will, of impact. Now, this, of course, I'm going to shameless plug. This is why things like Growing Victoria are very important, because we know that in order to have financial sustainability moving forward, our tax base needs to grow. And so that's why, last year, of course, Danielle is very heavily involved with this, also at the direction of the mayor. We're trying to be very intentional with Growing Victoria. And if you're thinking, I've been hearing a lot about new things that are going on. It's not really tracking as to why the 2025 value is the second lowest in 10 years. Well, that's because many of the things that we've celebrated over the last 6 months are not captured in that value for 2025, but hopefully will be captured for the assessment next year. And so think of, Amazon's a perfect example, right? That's not captured yet. The retail improvement that's going up, that obviously will be captured in the future. There's many restaurants and other retail stores that have also been improved or have been finished and opened over the last 6 months that aren't necessarily captured in this valuation from January. And so, again, we're making progress in being aggressive with Growing Victoria. It's just unfortunately not captured in this specific year. But hopefully some of that, like the things that I just described, are captured in the following year. But that's why focusing on Growing Victoria is very important. And one successful example of this is related to downtown. And so back in 2020, when we did that verdunity study, or that land use fiscal analysis, it was very intentional with recommending that we focus on infill and reinvestment, with the idea that investing resources into some of these older existing neighborhoods, which downtown is part of that's the best way to stabilize and grow property values in those respective areas. And so our intentional focus on downtown started to really kind of increase in its force, stemming from that study. And it was amplified after we completed the Downtown Master Plan in 2021, which made some recommendations for some quick wins. I'm not gonna walk you through these, but this was a table that was shown at the conclusion of the Downtown Master Plan that highlighted some recommendations. And so the De Leon Plaza expansion, for example, was on there as a high impact project. We of course succeeded in that. There's many others in here, ranging from capital improvements to programmatic improvements to events to technological enhancements. There's quite a bit of recommendations here. Now, we knew at the time that we were going to need a ongoing revenue source to be able to focus on downtown long term. And so one of the recommendations that came from the Downtown Master Plan was the creation of a tax increment reinvestment zone, which we established in 2021. And we were joined by the Navigation District and Victoria College in that effort. And ultimately, that tax increment reinvestment zone was started in hopes that it would build some money over time, and we could start leveraging that to continue our investment in downtown. We knew that it was going to take several years before the TERS started to see some money. And so in the meantime, we decided to work with the Sales Tax Development Corporation to fund grant programs for downtown, help fund Main Street. We started to really increase our dependency, if you will, on the Sales Tax Development Corporation for downtown-centric things. That potentially has reached a point where we can start having the conversation about beginning to transfer some of that financial responsibility to the tax increment reinvestment zone because of what I showed you earlier, that the tax increment reinvestment zone is seeing a huge increase in its value. And what I find interesting is that the increase in value within the boundary of the tax increment reinvestment zone is representative of almost a fourth of the increase in total value for commercial and industrial across the board. And so it's really telling about the movement that we're seeing in increase in values within the tax increment reinvestment zone or downtown. And as the redundancy study pointed out, intentional investment and intentional focus in an area usually results in an increase in property values. And this is a success story for us, that we were intentional with investing energy and time into downtown 5 years ago. And we're seeing the results of that through the increased values that we're seeing in downtown and the tax increment reinvestment zone. And so with that, I'll finish the presenting of the property tax rolls with just summarizing once again what they are. Overall, a decrease of 1.2%, a decrease in residential of 4.3%, an increase in commercial of 2.8%, and of course, a big increase within our tax increment reinvestment zone, which that money can only be utilized for projects within it. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have on the values part of it.
You said you were going to come back to 2019, and if you did go back to it, I missed it.
It's in my next presentation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Any other questions on that part? Okay.
Are you changing it or did I just flow? Okay. Okay, so now we get to the good part. So very excited to present to you the fiscal year 2026 proposed budget. Very similar format of a presentation and flow than consistent with what we did in June. Some of this might be repetitive to you, but I want to be mindful of the fact that we might have new viewers, more people paying attention maybe to this particular meeting. So I want to make sure that I'm as thorough as I was in June in presenting the fiscal year 2026 budget. But before I do, I want to give a quick shout out to our finance folks who played a huge role in putting this together. Of course, that includes Wesley. I'm not going to give Gilbert credit anymore, but that of course includes Wesley, Laura, and Marisa. And so thank you all so much for everything that you did in helping put this together for us. As in any year, we always try and focus on presenting the budget within themes, if you will. And of course, I already alluded to some of the impact that the reduced values is having. And of course, that's the economy. We always budget for very conservatively, and so we have healthy reserves. Of course, we always propose a balanced budget. Of course, we're going to have a conversation on the property tax rate. And also pleased to confirm that we have included that historic pay program recommendation that came out of the subcommittee work. I'll speak a little bit about the health plan and of course the CIP and community center, which is heavily driving the increase in the budget for this upcoming year. And I will highlight a few examples of how this is a very public safety centric budget. So overall, we're proposing an expense budget of $254 million, so very similar to what you saw in June. Revenue budget of $242 million. There's a delta there of almost $12 million, and as we have described and explained in the past, this is due to the fact that we have access to excess cash that we apply to one-time expenditures, and so that allows us to just do more projects. And so when we say that we're proposing a balanced budget, what we mean is that we're proposing a balanced budget when it refers to recurring revenue and recurring expenditures. And so this delta is attributed to one-time projects and one-time expenditures, which we'll explain some of that as we go through the presentation. Some of the changes in today's formal proposed budget in comparison to what was presented in June. Very minimal changes. There was a minor adjustment made to the CDBG mid grant revenue to reflect the actual grant allocation per our CIP program. We also made a couple of changes on the expenses side. And so we, for example, reduced the Motorola contract due to basically we're going to be partnering with TxDOT, and TxDOT's going to be covering some more of the costs related to the Motorola contract. We corrected an item related to the over 65 premiums. We've adjusted the debt service per our schedule. We have added a couple of things that are relevant to compensation and also relevant to the subcommittee. So we, for example, now have officially increased the part-time hourly rate to every part-timer minus the part-timers at the golf course. And so we've increased that part-time hourly rate to $14 an hour from $12. And that's what we're officially proposing in the budget moving forward. We've also are proposing a PTO buyback program. We did a PTO buyback program last year. We weren't in a position to recommend doing one in June when we presented the preliminary budget, but we are in a position now to propose to you doing a PTO buyback program. Not to the extent that we did last year, but nonetheless a PTO buyback program. And so how does this $254 million compare to current year? And so current year, it's a $194 million budget. It's nearly a $60 million difference. And as you can tell by this bar chart at the bottom, it's primarily being driven by the CIP, personnel, which of course can be attributed to that historic pay program, vehicles, which can be attributed to a major investment in public safety fleet vehicles, as well as other items. And so I'll focus on the top contributing items first. The biggest one being the CIP. And so the column on the left shows what the CIP was for fiscal year 25, which was $40 million. You'll see that going into fiscal year 26, we thought we would have a CIP worth almost $33 million, but we had some pretty big things happen since last year when we projected out 26, primarily caused by the change in residential drainage. And so you'll notice on the residential drainage row that 9.36 was basically moved from fiscal year 25 to 26. That's phase one of Bon Air. So you may recall from David's CIP presentation last month, or in June, I should say, that we ended up not doing Bon Air phase one. And so instead, we just took that money and now are applying it to fiscal year 26 to do those two phases. I got the neighborhood wrong? It's a Lone Tree Acre. 936 is Lone Tree. Oh, my bad. Sorry. Thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt you. No, thank you for interrupting me when I'm wrong. That's in the residential streets. My apologies. The drainage there, I don't know if you heard Gilbert, but that is attributed to the Lone Tree drainage project, which is one of the projects that we're awaiting word from on the CDBG MIT, which is also the reason why the utility SCADA is also shifted from 25 to 26, because those projects are projects that are we're relying on the CDBG MIT for. So I apologize for that confusion. Thank you, Gilbert. He gets credit now for the budget. The biggest thing, of course, was the community center. And so that has its own role now, because of course, this time last year, we didn't anticipate that we would actually be doing the community center project. And so you see that almost $29 million in fiscal year 26. All in all, it increased the CIP by almost 39 million to roughly 79 million. And so that's driving a big chunk of the increase in budget year over year. This shows just a visual of how we've increased our CIP funding over the last few years. Of course, in fiscal year 24, it was heavily driven by the public safety headquarter building. And now, for fiscal year 26, is being heavily driven by the community center project. The next thing that is contributing to the increase or the delta in our expenditures, of course, is the historic pay program that I alluded to. This is the usual slide that I include to simply just highlight the fact that it's been a priority for us over the last 5 years to invest in our employees. That's not a new priority for us. That's been a big priority for myself, for my administration, for everybody involved. We've been fortunate to be able to have had done that investment over the last 5 years because of what I showed you in the previous presentation, that we saw those historic increases in appraised values between 2021 and 2024. That afforded us the ability to be able to do this. And so if we want to continue to be aggressive with investing in our employees, and we're not seeing the increase in appraised values that we benefited from over the last few years, well, then we need to have conversations about how we're going to be able to sustain those expenses moving forward if we can't depend on our appraised values going up double digits every year. Of course, the biggest difference compared to what you see here and what we're proposing for 26 is, of course, the inclusion and the involvement of the subcommittee, which, of course, was put together basically this time last year, in order to take a deeper dive into basically how we can be more aggressive with pay. Because even though we had made those investments over the last 5 years, we're still seeing police departments still struggling with retention and recruitment. We were still struggling with vacancies with public works. I mean, we were still seeing we weren't really making the progress that we hoped that we would make. And so ultimately, we worked with the subcommittee to make a recommendation that we presented to you in April. And of course, some of the elements that were included in that recommendation included the policy direction from the committee, which of course was a very public safety centric policy direction. We also looked at some data. We looked at analyzing cost of living differential to make sure that all the data we were looking at was adjusted to the cost of living in Victoria. Since, for example, comparing us to Sugar Land is really not fair if you're not taking the cost of living component into account, since it's more expensive to live in Sugar Land than it is to live in Victoria. And so we wanted to be mindful of those things, while at the same time being mindful of that sustainable component that I alluded to. Because the committee wants to continue, and we all want to continue to be as aggressive as we can be. And so ultimately, there was a proposal that was made, which of course hits on a few categories. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I'm going to go through this really fast for sake of time. But we, of course, are making a recommendation to improve pay for police, fire, public works, and everybody else. This is just an example of what the new pay structure for police looks like. You get a better sense of it showing it this way, because I wanted to show what that pay increase, that net pay increase has been over that same duration, that 5 or 6 years that I mentioned that we've been investing in employees that entire time. And so this really shows you that aggregate impact of those investments over the 5 years, which is being heavily driven by the fact that in fiscal year 26, we are proposing almost $1.4 million being utilized just for police. And so out of this bar chart, even though over that 6-year period, it's a 43% increase, the increase in starting pay for a police officer between fiscal year 25 and 26 is 14%. And so you could see, looking at the table, that 5 years ago, starting pay was $45,000, and we're proposing that to be $60,000. And so that's a huge difference in what we've been able to do over the last 5 or 6 years. For fire, we're doing the same thing. We're implementing some steps, making some recommendations. One of the biggest differences between police and fire was that it seemed that with police, one of the biggest concerns was trying to attract a new, if you will, police officer, while also keeping the police officers in that 5 to 10 year experience, or what we refer to as our senior police officers. And that's where the data proved that we were furthest behind. The fire department was a little different. The fire department showed that we were more behind in ranked positions. And so that's what we've adjusted for here. And so, for example, in this particular table here, we're basically showing a 10% increase in starting pay for a firefighter. But the positions of engineer, lieutenant, and captain all are proposed to go up more than 20%. That is how far behind we were in those ranked positions. Which many of you know, we've lost a lot of experienced folks in the fire department. So hopefully this helps us retain folks better moving forward. We clarified and made some improvements to the EMS tract as well. And so the EMS starting pay is also going up 10%. We clarified the new structure under the direction of our new fire marshal. And so she's done a great job of putting her team together. all in all, it's about a $1.3 million investment for the fire department as well. And you can see when we look at that 6-year comparison that the increase for starting pay for a firefighter has gone up 38%. Maybe not quite as much as police, but still in the high 30s. Then we'll talk briefly about Public Works. The biggest thing that we were trying to clean up with Public Works was just clear progression. And so we've adjusted the pay structure to more clearly show progression within the department. The committee has shown a lot of interest, and so have we, and so have the directors, in making sure that we have this clear as a picture for every department, and that it's very clear for anybody entering the organization what their potential progression plan could look like. And so we cleaned that up for Public Works, as well as enhancing starting pay where we could, specifically with maintenance worker and crew leader, which was the areas where we were seeing the biggest impact. And so, for example, we were able to increase maintenance worker starting pay by 7% and utility crew leader by 13%. The cost to Public Works is not as much. It's roughly $400,000. You see, though, that even though that investment isn't as great, that percentage increase in net pay is also in the high 30%. The reason why police and fire investments are much greater is obviously because there's more of them. And so anytime that we're looking at making adjustments to police and fire department, that always hits the budget to a greater degree just because we have literally hundreds of them combined. With solid waste, we were running into an issue with competition in the private sector, and so we adjusted their pay accordingly to be more competitive. This has made a difference and is making a difference in recruitment for CDL drivers within solid waste. You'll see that over that same 6-year period, we've actually been the most aggressive with our solid waste truck drivers. A department and position that probably is taken for granted, but is extremely critical for our community. Now, what about everybody else? And so we were very intentional in trying to prioritize those areas that I just went over, but we were also wanting to try and do something for everybody else, which we refer to as general population. And so we were mindful of that analysis that I alluded to earlier that takes into account cost of living adjustments. But more importantly, we wanted to try and, for the first time, include a tenure factor. Much of the feedback that we've received internally is that there's just a lot of compression, not only between ranks, or there was, but compression as it related to tenure. And so what I mean by that is, if we have an employee that's been with us for 20 years and somebody that started last year, we want to make sure that we're taking into account a tenure factor there and that those individuals aren't necessarily making the same. You can probably understand why a 20-year employee might be upset if they're making just as much as the person that started last year, right? And so we wanted to make sure that we could incorporate a tenure factor so that our more tenured employees could feel more valued from a compensation standpoint. So we adjusted those things as part of that. We identified that roughly 243 employees were actually below market. And so we're recommending some adjustments to their pay that would also go into effect in October. This is a little bit harder to quantify because these are more all over the place. Some are as low as a couple percentage points. Some are as high as over 20% pay as well. And so they're a little bit harder to executive summarize them for you. But nonetheless, there are 243 individuals that we consider general population that are seeing a pay increase. Now, the exercise did lead to realizing that we have 142-ish employees that are within the market range. And so for these particular individuals, rather than providing a pay increase, we're proposing doing a $1,000 stipend so that at least everybody going into next year receives some financial increase, whether in the form of a one-time stipend or in the form of a pay increase. I mentioned earlier that we've incorporated a PTO program for fiscal year 2026. We've left the tiers of experience the same to, again, benefit to a greater degree the employee that's been here longer. That's very, very important to us and was very, very important to the committee. that we just find as many ways as possible to better show our appreciation to the long tenured folks. And structuring it this way with the PTO structure allows us to do that. You'll see that the number of hours that we're proposing could be sold back for 2026 are half of the amount of hours that we offered up last year. That's just a cost thing, where we're trying to be mindful of costs. We're not currently in a position where we could afford a $1.2 or $1.3 million PTO buyback program. And so we're proposing these hours as shown here. One of the things that we want to be very mindful of is that we don't want to cause an employee to be left with no hours. And so part of the requirement would be that an employee has to maintain 40 hours in their bank and can only sell hours above the 40. And we plan on taking that snapshot on November 1st. And so there'll be a couple of months and a few months of communicating to employees so that they can make their plans accordingly and they can adjust how they want to use their PTO, how they see fit, knowing that they'll be able to sell any amount of hours above 40. Overall, what we're basically proposing through a combination of recurring expenses in the proposed pay program plus the one-time stipend and the one-time PTO is basically $4.4 million. And so that's why we say it's a historic pay program, because we have never been able to propose a pay program of that value in one year over the other. We knew that the financial piece of it was going to be important for obvious reasons. Obviously, last year there were conversations about making adjustment to TMRS. There were conversations about tax rate implications. There was just quite a bit that was being talked about, and we needed to make some assumptions early on in our work with the subcommittee to come up with a recommendation. We knew right off the bat that having conversations about TMRS was just not on the table, and they weren't. And so we, in essence, had to come up with some of these assumptions that you see here. This is literally the exact same slide that I showed you in April when we presented the results of the subcommittee work, which show an assumption that we would receive an additional $500,000 in increased property tax revenue. It shows an assumption of other revenue increases, such as on the sales tax side, ambulance revenue side. It also shows the assumption that we would implement a stormwater rate at some point, which, as you know, could free up some recurring expenses on the general fund side if the new stormwater fund picks those expenses up. And so we had to make some assumptions in order to make a recommendation for the pay program. And I think it's important that we keep that in mind as this presentation proceeds. I also would be remiss if I didn't, on behalf of the committee, verbalize some goals that are still in the works and that are still priority items for the committee. Because looking at the cost of the proposed pay program isn't something that I would recommend we solely look at in a snapshot, but that we basically ask ourselves, is being as aggressive as we can be with improving pay and benefits something that we want to do every year? Or is it something that we want to just try and tackle when we can, right? We obviously have been able to do that over the last 6 years, every year. But we know that we're not gonna see the increase in appraised values moving forward to the extent that we saw over the last 5 years. And so it's just important that we keep in mind that even though we are proposing a historic pay program, there's more investment in our employees that we want to explore with the committee doing. And so these include, for example, making sure that we can honor the STEP program pay increases for public safety. The STEP programs do basically provide a increase in pay every other year. So we want to make sure that we, when we're thinking about the long-term financial sustainability of the city, that we keep in mind that we have those commitments that we want to follow through with. We know that we want to take a deeper dive into general population. Obviously, we prioritize public works, public safety in this particular fiscal year, but there's obviously a lot of other positions that we're also struggling with from the recruitment and retention standpoint that also warrant being as aggressive, just not this year, right? I mentioned that we had over 140 positions that aren't even seeing a pay increase at all in fiscal year 26, right? And so we want to keep in mind that there is some additional investment that we want to explore. We know that we want to explore the minimum wage. Currently, it's at $15 and $14 now for part-timers. And so we know that that's an ongoing topic of conversation. And more importantly, we know that it's a priority for the committee to ensure that we test the market every 3 to 5 years, and that we're not stagnant with our pay ranges and things of that sort. We know that the market is going to shift. Now, obviously, it shifted very aggressively during the pandemic. I don't envision that market shifting as aggressive over the next 3 or 5 years because every other community is seeing what we're seeing, right? A plateauing of values. But it's definitely something that we want to keep in mind when we're thinking long-term financial sustainability of the city. I guess before I proceed, I don't know if any member of the committee wants to add anything or if I missed anything.
No, you did a good job.
Okay. Okay. In addition to making a recommendation for improved pay for our existing employees, we're also proposing adding these positions as discussed in June. Some of these positions are attributed to wanting to be more intentional with succession planning. And so as an example, the last 3 positions on here, Assistant Director of Public Works, Assistant Director of IT, Associate Judge, all of those are very intentional positions that we're recommending adding for the purpose of succession planning. Some of these positions are also a product out of just necessity. And so, for example, the fleet manager position, I would argue is a necessity because we know that we need to make sure that our fleet is on the roads. And we don't want to put ourselves in a position like we're in right now where we had to make a significant one-time investment with fleet for police and fire, right? We need to have a better plan so that we're not put in a position where we have to every so often make a huge investment. And so having somebody whose full-time job it is to stay on top of our fleet would be very beneficial for us long-term. The police records technician, and so some of you may or may not recall that when Chief Young provided his annual report earlier this year, that he showed a significant increase in open records requests from the police record standpoint. And so they really need the increased manpower there to keep up with the increase in open records requests. And as I alluded to earlier, the Growing Victoria campaign is critical if we want to ensure that we're doing the best we can to stay up to date, or not stay up to date, but to be as aggressive as we can be with Growing Victoria for the benefit of all. And we are recommending adding a communications position as well so that we can continue and build upon the success that Ashley and her team have been a part of over the last couple of years. And so all in all, once you add all of that together, you add the pay program, you add the one-time expenditures of the stipend, you add the new positions, you add the buyback program, we're basically looking at about a $5.3 million investment in personnel, which again, very historic. This is just another graph that illustrates the variance aspect of it, which the big takeaway here, of course, is that it's heavily general fund. Most of our positions, specifically with public safety, are general fund, and so it's not a shocker that the bulk of the financial hit of that money is in the general fund, which of course is primarily funded through sales tax, property tax. One of the other biggest things that's impacting the overall budget is, of course, as I've already alluded to, is that large one-time expense in fleet acquisitions. And so I think it's important to note that out of the listed acquisitions, over $6 million is attributed to public safety, and that includes 9 police vehicles, 4 ambulances, and 3 pumpers. We, of course, also have a couple of public works-centric items there and the 3 automated trucks for environmental services. But again, a very public safety-centric budget. Another thing that's incorporated into the overall budget is, of course, on the expenditure side is our debt service. And so this simply just shows a very minimal variance there compared to last year. We are not in a position to do a bond redemption program. We just do not have the excess cash flowing in this upcoming year that we've had in the last few years. This, of course, is not taking into account any new future debt that we would plan to issue. That'll come back later when I talk about the debt that we're going to issue for the community center. Normally, when we issue debt, we don't really see that big hit until the following year. This is just an illustration that shows currently where we sit as it relates to our debt service, to remind you that we will continue to see some debt capacity freeing up over the next 5 to 10 years. Any questions on any of that? Okay. So on the revenue side, the proposed revenue budget for fiscal year 26 is $242 million. That's a difference of $57 or close to $58 million compared to fiscal year 25. As you can see in the bottom, it's primarily being driven by an increase in bond proceeds, which is directly contributed or attributed to our large CIP that I went over earlier. We're also seeing the continual shift of the money related to CDBG MIT. You'll see internal service charges there that could be associated with fleet investments, but I'll walk you through some of the more, I think, items of interest, which of course are related to property tax and sales tax, because even though they don't represent a big chunk of the increase in revenue, they're obviously very meaningful to the general fund. This is the exact same table that I showed earlier in walking you through the values. And so again, we're seeing a negative 1.2% overall, a reduction in residential of 4%, and an increase in commercial of almost 3%. And so that is basically leading me to the recommendation of the voter approval tax rate of 0.4820, which is an increase to the existing tax rate by basically a little over a cent. You'll see at the very bottom that the impact to the net increase to the general fund is over $600,000. That's important because keep in mind that one of the assumptions that we made earlier in the year with the compensation committee was at least $500,000 coming from increased property tax revenue. And so this is directly contributed to that assumption that we presented earlier in the year, and can also be attributed to our desire to ensure that we have revenue moving forward to honor those commitments, such as paying for the STEP programs and putting us in a position to hopefully be able to tackle more aggressively some of the positions within our general population. You'll see there a decrease on the debt service fund. Basically, there's just too much money that was cash that would be flowing into that. Recall that we had proposed issuing some debt in fiscal year 25 for that Bonaire project that we didn't issue. And so when we were at this point last year and we were anticipating the timing of that debt, we were anticipating obviously having that payment in the current fiscal year that we're in now, which we don't because we didn't issue it. And so we need to release some of that cash flow. We can't have too much excess cash flow going to the debt service fund above and beyond our commitments. And so overall, the tax revenue net increase is of a little over $500,000. And as I alluded to, we're not recommending a bond redemption program. Now, it's important to note, just to kind of try and connect this slide with the presentation on values, that the no new revenue tax rate of 0.4710 is a slight increase to the existing tax rate. And that's basically because our values came in at a negative. And so if the intent of the no new revenue tax rate is for you to generate the same amount of money that you did the prior year, well, obviously, the way the formula would work is that if those values went down and they went to the negative, well, then you're going to have to increase your tax rate a little bit to be able to generate that same amount of money. But again, we're proposing the voter approval tax rate, which is the max increase that we can proceed with for the reasons described, and making sure that we have the money that we need for our pay program moving forward. Now, if you're wondering, what is that impact on residents? Recall that we saw an aggregate decrease of 4.3% in values for residential. And so the way that we always show you this particular table is that we take that aggregate impact and show you what that impact would be. And so when we take that and we apply that negative 4.3% to values, even though we're proposing increase in the tax rate, you'll see that there's actually a reduction in what folks would pay. Now, as I say every year, obviously that impact varies person to person property to property. And it's very difficult, obviously, for us to make a recommendation or assumption taking into account a million different scenarios, right? And so our go-to way to do it is to simply just show you what the impact would be based off the aggregate impact on residential, which again is that negative 4.3%. If you're wondering, why are we having to increase the tax rate? We haven't had this conversation in several years. Well, you would be correct. Our community, our city has not been in a position to have to look at increasing the tax rate in 6 or 7 years. And so earlier, when I mentioned, remember what happened in 2018, remember what happened in 2019, was to try and make the point to you that the last time that the city had to consider increasing the property tax rate was in 2018 and 2019. In 2018, we saw that negative 4.4% in the NTAV. In 2019, the city saw the lowest figure in new improvements. And so there's clearly a correlation between the times that the city has had to consider tax rate increase and decreased values in new improvements. And as I alluded to earlier, what we're experiencing here going into fiscal year 26 is both. We're seeing both a decrease in NTAV of negative 1.2% and seeing the second lowest figure in new improvements that we've seen in 15 years. And so the city's been in this position before, basically, right? It's just that the last time we was back in 2018, 2019. I should have overlaid a line here or something that kind of reminded you of the historic increases in TAV between 2020 and 2024, because maybe it goes without saying, but when the NTAV is double digits or is very on the positive side, it puts us in a position to decrease the tax rate but generate more money, which is what happened between fiscal years 2021 and 2025. Any questions on that? Mark, you're thinking.
I am. How much of the revenue that will increase is from new taxes, not previous taxes? In other words, if we're gonna, and I don't remember the figure, but we're gonna realize more tax dollars, how much of that's gonna be from new property values?
Do you have that figure? I don't have that figure.
Yeah, it's up there. Right there. That next slide. Yeah.
Oh, there it is.
No, well, next one. Go to the next one. At the bottom.
The bottom.
Point it out to me.
Yeah, which one?
New improvements. There's a column for new improvements and existing values. And so you see that new improvements is $80,000.
Okay.
Yes. I always remember it being here because the total is that 127,000 that's listed in small on the left. That's both the general fund and debt service combined.
Can you go back to the one where you show how people will pay less in taxes?
I'm not suggesting everybody will pay less in taxes. I'm suggesting that
This is for
if there's a negative 4.3%, yes.
This is for residential.
Correct.
Commercial, how would it be for commercial, roughly? Would they be this? Did they go up in value or stay the same? They went up in value.
Well, yeah, commercial went up 2.8%.
Okay.
Yeah.
That explains it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then
Okay,
this
thank you.
decrease is specifically, if I'm correct, it's specific to if the value of the home saw a decrease, not based on this. So if the tax roll, so the 2024 tax roll appraised value at 100,000, if the 2025 is 95.7, that's where they would see the decrease even with this increase.
I got it now.
Yeah.
It's taking the actual decrease seen and applying it to as an average, if you will.
Right.
The reason I was slightly confused was this shows you're going to get a lot less from residential, but we're going to make it up in new and commercial.
Correct. Correct. And so earlier, when I was going over the history of values, I didn't describe it this way, but basically what was happening there for several years was that the residential owner was carrying the brunt of increases in tax revenue, where businesses and commercial were not. And so we're basically seeing the opposite in this particular year moving forward. Now, again, I'm not saying that everybody would see a decrease in net taxes, right? Every situation is completely different. So I want to make sure we're clear about that. And same could even apply to businesses. If there was a business that actually experienced a negative or decrease in their valuation, they would be in the same boat. Okay, so moving on then to sales tax. And so one of the reasons why we're typically safe from having to make any rash cuts is because we budget very conservatively. And the sales tax slide really shows that very clearly. And so, for example, you'll see that in fiscal year 25, we budgeted $19 million, but you'll see that we're actually projected to end this fiscal year at basically close to $21 million. And so we always budget very conservatively. Now that helps us achieve two things. One, it helps us not be put in that position where we have to be rash about cuts, but it also helps us have that excess cash at the end of a fiscal year that we always apply to one-time expenses the following year, right? And so one, for example, you might be thinking, well, geez, I'd like to be more aggressive with sales tax projections. Okay, great, we can be. But then if things don't come the way that we expect, we'd have to be rash with cuts, and then we wouldn't have as much money to apply towards one-time expenditures the following year. So, there's a give and take there. And so we're basically proposing for fiscal year 26, again, very conservative approach, and proposing that we budget $19.5 million, which is only an increase of $500,000 comparing budget to budget. This shows you the relationship between all of the above. Excuse me. And so this shows you the correlation between the tax rate, our property tax budget, the sales tax, just to kind of give you a sense of how they correlate. As I've alluded to already, that property tax rate goes down when other elements of your economy are succeeding, right? So if your economy is growing and our sales tax revenue is increasing significantly, well, it puts a lesser burden on the tax rate. If values are increasing, well, it puts a lesser burden on the tax rate. And so there's clearly a correlation between the economy growing through values and through sales tax movement and the property tax rate, which again, that's why the Growing Victoria campaign is very important. Because if we want to get back to a position where we can where it makes it easier to consider a tax rate reduction, it's going to have to come through the benefit of increased tax base on the property side and sales tax side. Any questions on that? Okay. Just some additional highlights. I'm going to go through this next section fairly quickly because some of it is repetitive. I've mentioned that the general fund is the one that's absorbing the bulk of the pay increases. That's because this is where police and fire are funded out of. And so you'll see that for fiscal year 26, we're proposing a $67 million budget, which is an increase of almost $6 million compared to last year. And you could see how a lot of that is literally being driven by the pay program, as well as other public safety services, like the investment in fleet. Yes?
Public Works is less than the previous year?
Yes, and so some of that, I'll walk you through that here shortly in a slide. So this slide kind of takes a deeper dive into why the expense budget, or where that almost $6 million is coming from. And so I've already mentioned it, that it's driven through personnel as well as some vehicle purchases for public safety. You'll see that there was actually a reduction in some capital expenditures, just related to some ongoing one-time expenses. I thought I had a different slide here. Wesley, I don't remember off the top of my head more specifically that negative $400,000 in public work services.
One-time expenses capital.
Okay, so it is reflective, oops.
It's all another thing.
Sorry, in that, got it, okay, thank you. On the revenue side, we're showing an increase of 3 million. Of course, I already shared with you that additional revenue that we would generate through sales tax, property tax, but we're also showing that increase in ambulance billing revenue, which was also an assumption that we shared in April as part of the recommendation in the pay program. What we show there as other is being primarily driven by the fact that or the commitment of the county for fire and EMS services is going up by over $600,000. So we're increasing the budget for fire, and of course what they pay us is a percentage of that, and so that's why that contribution is coming in greater. This is the usual slide that we show that kind of just basically illustrates that we build in a cushion. And so you see that we are basically expecting to end fiscal year 26 with almost $20 million in reserves, which is about $3 million greater than our minimum reserve requirement. On the utility fund side, we are basically recommending for fiscal year 26, $42.2 million, which is actually a decrease of almost $2.5 million. And a lot of that has to do with just a decrease in professional services, maintenance, less CIP money going over to the CIP fund. That's all shown here in the red. But you'll also see how there's an increase, though, related to personnel, because we're obviously also doing a investment in personnel funded out of the utility fund as well. I mentioned the decrease in transfers out due to fewer utility-centric CIP projects in fiscal year 26. And of course, we've mentioned the SCADA project. And the regional wastewater treatment plant project, you may recall shortly after the boil water notice, I was making a recommendation to possibly shift some things around if we wanted to be more aggressive with SCADA. And you may recall me recapping that we actually, through the money that we're anticipated to receive from the CDBG MIT, wasn't actually enough money to pay for that project at the wastewater treatment plant, and that we were gonna need some money from the Sales Tax Development Corporation for that project. That's what that is. And so if we do end up getting to the point where we decide to not do that project in order to speed up the SCADA project, that almost $1 million that you see there in VSTDC, we would recommend we apply towards the SCADA. And this again just kind of shows you where we're estimated to end fiscal year 26 at almost $10 million, which is a little over $2 million above our minimum reserve requirement. The environmental services budget is pretty straightforward. The major increases here, we're proposing a $9.2 million budget. That's primarily being driven by the fact that we have those new garbage trucks, as well as the fact that this fund is also actually contributing towards buying some of the ambulances in specific. And so you may recall the chief and Daryl kind of joking about that during the preliminary budget presentations. I forgot to mention that one of those assumptions that we made with the subcommittee earlier in the year on how we would pay for the pay program actually also had a transfer out of this fund. That's what you see at the bottom there, where it says a non-CIP transfer to general fund from post-closure for pay program. That was another one of those assumptions that we made earlier in the year that we're following through with in this proposed budget. No change to fees associated with environmental services. And again, healthy fund balance at the end of fiscal year 26 for them. Really quickly on the health plan fund, we are proposing an increase of $500,000 on the medical claim side. We've obviously been very intentional with trying to provide enhancements to the benefits as well. We're not proposing changing anything for fiscal year 26 because we want to kind of just wait to see what happens. There's quite a bit of movement right now with claims, and so we just feel comfortable just letting things be and stay as they are. You may recall, though, that last year we actually introduced that new EPO plan, and so we want to try and maybe be a little bit more aggressive with educating our employees to hopefully have more movement towards that plan next year, which could, in theory, help stabilize a little bit of what we're seeing on the claim side. I'm not going to repeat all of that. This is simply just to illustrate that we are beginning to see a reduction in our reserves for the health fund. And so one of the things that we want to be mindful of moving forward is that thanks to us having a healthy reserve, any changes that we need to consider to the benefits, we don't have to be rash about. Some of you who were on council or attended council meetings at the time when council had to be somewhat rash with the high deductible plans and things of that sort, we're not in that position anymore. You know, we are not in that hole or in that downward decline to the extent that the city was over 10 years ago. And so that puts us in a good position to be proactive with how we want to handle changes in the market from the health insurance standpoint. Really quickly on the hot tax fund, this is a very similar budget to last year. The biggest changes are related to that now we're actually accounting for Tejas Fest. In last year's budget, we hadn't adequately done that. So we're doing that here. We have a transfer for the CIP for the community center, which I'll expand on here in a bit. This just shows the same thing. We are actually, for the first time in a few years, actually proposing an increase in hotel tax revenue. And so we are proposing a very, very small increase, but we're seeing some movement there. And so we're being somewhat forced to be a little aggressive with this fund, because this fund, as you can see by this pie chart, a lot of things depend on this fund. Are, of course, funding our CVB department, some CIP projects, especially now with the community center, the program that Joel and the Tourism Advisory Board go through every year to award some funds for agencies. We use some money for sports fields. I mean, there's quite a bit of things that come out of this fund. And this is the second fiscal year in a row where I try and kind of give you a heads up that something's gonna have to change, because it's not sustainable long-term that all of these different things are dependent on this fund in the absence of this fund not growing quicker. Really quick on the community center project, $35 million project, but what's in the budget for fiscal year 26 is only roughly $29 million. And so basically that's made up of these three buckets. And so of course we had the election in May. That election in May is captured by that blue first bucket there. And so out of that 2% venue tax for hotels and that 5% short-term rentals, we're able to leverage that to basically issue about $9 million in venue tax bonds. Then you see that we plan on committing $400,000 per year from existing hotel tax revenues to be able to leverage an additional $6 million in CO bonds. That was something that we were trying to do in response to the feedback we received to lessen the CO contribution, because you may recall that when we originally made the recommendation to fund community center, we were recommending $15 million in COs being paid out of our property taxes to go towards the project. And so we've been able to decrease that to basically roughly $10 million. This is just a different table that kind of illustrates to a greater level of specificity how we intend on funding that $35 million. But again, what's in fiscal year 26 is only that $29 million. And this whole topic probably warrants a completely different presentation, right? Because I know it's a lot, but it's in the budget, so I wanted to make sure that it was included in the presentation. And these are just some elements that we want to continue to be mindful of as we have the conversation on the budget, the tax rate, and just everything else that we need to do. We know that we've tabled up to this point the conversation on the stormwater utility, but that's something that we want to pick back up. You've heard us allude to the fact that we need to have a rate study. This doesn't just apply to water and sewer. We know that garbage rates need to be assessed as well. We know that we have the election that was just approved earlier today that could impact what happens in the budget moving forward related to the fire, civil service, or collective bargaining. Of course, I already mentioned to you some of the ongoing goals of the compensation committee. And there's just some other projects that are in the works that might impact the budgets moving forward, such as the City Hall Complex renovation project, as well as the water feasibility study that's ongoing. And so with that, I'll kind of just end it there with the timeline. Of course, it was mentioned earlier that we had a special meeting on September 9th. But before then, we have an opportunity to discuss the budget and tax rate and a couple of other opportunities. And so on August 19th, we'll post for a budget work session to address anything that you might want to address, talk about, et cetera, as it relates to the budget. And then at our regular meeting on September 2nd, we'll have the official public hearing, the first official vote on the budget ordinance. We'll have a tax rate public hearing, and the first vote on the tax rate ordinance then as well, and so on and so forth. And so with that, that concludes my presentation. I'm sorry it took me a while. It's obviously a labor of love of staff putting it together. So very grateful for them for that, and thank you for the opportunity to present the budget, and happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions on the budget presentation? Is that a no?
No.
Okay, all right.
I have a question later.
So
What?
then.
Excuse me?
I have a question later I can ask.
Oh, okay.
If that concludes that presentation, then we will need to go back up to item E3 to discuss the tax rate.
Yes, sir. Item E3 is a resolution proposing the tax rate, scheduling public hearings, and scheduling a vote to adopt the tax rate for fiscal year 2025-2026.
Sorry, I want to just go back to same presentation, but I want to pull up the tax rate slide just for reference.
Sure.
It's not moving on me. There we go. I should just go through the whole thing again. Just kidding.
Let's don't.
Hey. Okay, so as I mentioned during the presentation, the proposed tax rate that's included in your packet is for that 0.4820, which is the voter approval tax rate, or the max tax rate that it could be. And as I alluded during the presentation, that would generate that it would net over $500,000 once you combine the impact to the general fund and the debt service fund. And happy to answer any questions that y'all might have on the proposed tax rate.
Questions on the tax rate from Mr. Garza?
When was the last time we had a voter approval tax rate increase?
That's a good question. I would probably say never. I'm just kidding. Well, yeah, I'm not sure. Well, this kind of, so I didn't go through this, but the green line on this is actually representative of the rollback rate. So this green line would actually be the equivalent of the either 8% rollback rate, which it was before SB2, or the 3.5% that it is now. And so you can see that over, I guess, the history, we've adopted a tax rate that isn't the voter tax rate or the effective tax rate, which is what it was called before. But you'll start to notice that once you get to like 2020 through 2025, we start to get really, really, really close to that line. Because when you see the increase in property values, it affords you the opportunity to maximize your revenue and reduce the tax rate at the same time. I know that this graph makes it look like we did that in 2023, but I'm not sure. I think we were close, but I don't think that was the case.
Matter of fact, the tax went down because that's when we had the caterpillar abatement come in.
Got it.
Maybe I've misunderstood the question, but wouldn't we have had to have an election if we had had a rate that was higher than the voter-approved rate?
If it was higher, yes.
And since we haven't had an election, does that kind of answer the question too?
No, I think her question is basically when was the last time we maximized our tax rate to the point to where like it's right below triggering the election, basically.
So I have a hypothetical to kind of add to that, just out of curiosity. And Gilbert, maybe Wesley, and you, Mr. Garza, hypothetically, had we done that somewhere along the line, what position would that put us in now comparatively?
Yeah, so I know that I've mentioned to you, Councilman Butler, and some of you council members that were here when I first arrived might remember this, but prior to SB 2 going into effect, the rollback tax rate was 8%. And even though that was what the state law was, locally, Victoria had a policy to not surpass 5%. And so back in 2020, we ran an analysis on, how much more money would we have in the general fund had over the last 10 years, council would have adopted that 5% basically, and secured that additional 5% in revenue every year. And basically it was $5 million. And so that exercise back in 2020 yielded that the city would have had an additional $5 million in the general fund in 2020 had the city adopted and secured that additional 5% increase every year for the last 10 years. And the delta in the tax rate was around a little over 2 cents. And so if you're thinking, well, I thought a cent was only worth $500,000, how is it that an only difference in 2 cents yielded $5 million? Well, it's because of the compounding effect, right? And so part of what we were trying to illustrate with that exercise is that when you make decisions, we make decisions on tax rates, it has a compounding impact moving forward, right? And so that exercise, I think, helped some council members kind of see that. We haven't updated that analysis, since then, because we had good values over the last 5 years and there really wasn't, I guess, a need for it. But I will say that there are long-term implications to any decision that is made on the tax rate above and beyond just what might appear at face value.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Garza. So giving that then, I think probably in order to have a discussion on this, then we would need, Ms. Boone, am I correct, a motion and a second to kickstart that discussion?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any motions on the tax rate for the upcoming year?
Is there that fancy language that
Yeah, there's some language you have.
there's some kind of language that sounds backwards
No, ma'am,
from
not
what
for
it
this
should be.
meeting, when we
Yeah.
actually vote on the
That's-
tax rate in
This
the
is
budget.
just for the
but this
proposed
is-
tax rate.
Oh, okay.
That's when we actually adopt the rate.
Well, I move we discuss the tax rate as proposed.
So you move to adopt the tax rate as proposed?
Yes, I move to adopt the tax rate.
Okay, or adopt that as a proposed tax rate, okay.
I'll second.
All right, so I've got a motion and a second, so that will open up then discussion about that proposed rate. And so open to comments anyone may have on that rate.
So this does not set this, to be clear. This says that we have the option to utilize this tax rate. But we could determine another tax rate along the way. Is that correct?
So my understanding, and somebody correct me if I go astray here, what we are doing here is we are setting a proposed rate that is not a final rate. The final rate on the tax rate will be made in September. And when you set a proposed rate, that rate can go down between the proposed rate and your final rate, but it cannot go up.
Okay.
That's correct.
Did I say that correctly?
Yes, sir.
Any other comments on the rate? Okay. I have a couple. I just wanted to give everybody opportunity to weigh in on that. Tax rates are, and setting that is kind of one of those issues and one of those situations where it's a non-binary, okay? We're not talking about black and white, we're not talking about on or off. And so in any type of analysis like that, in any kind of situations like that, there can be more than one position that is rational, reasonable, supported by logic, and could be considered quote-unquote right, okay? And so from that standpoint, I think we all what we think is right or not, or more right than some other right, is basically based on priority and is based on perspective, is where it comes from. So I fully understand the recommendation for the maximum allowable tax rate, given the environment that we're in, financial environment. I know we're looking at some potential caps coming from the legislature that are looking like they probably will pass in the special session. You know, I understand the math behind it, the opportunity arguments, as Mr. Garza has presented on, you know, how that can multiply itself, and I understand all of the supportive reasoning behind that. I understand why Mr. Garza has proposed this rate, and if I was in his shoes, I would be proposing this rate as well, 100%. And I think from his standpoint and his job, that's the rate that he needed to propose. From a position of governance, however, I think there's a little bit different lens that I at least want to broach the topic of. And my concerns about the max rate, I will admit upfront, are philosophical, not necessarily black and white, X's and O's, pluses and minuses. Now, I want to be very clear up front. My comments are in no way reflective upon my support for the raises that we're talking about giving to our public safety folks and our general population, as Mr. Garza referred to it.
I should probably come up with a better term than that.
Yeah, that sounds very prison-y.
Yeah.
So, but, you know, 100%, I support those. We've committed to those, and those have to be in this budget. There's no doubt about that. Those are going to happen, and they have to be in this budget. My concern, and I at least want to voice this to council, is around the concept of assessing a max tax rate in the face of a shrinking tax base. Those two things philosophically create concerns for me. We have flat economic conditions, as Mr. Garza has referred to, or flat growth, I should say. You know, we've recognized that. We've seen that coming. The Growth and Grow Victoria initiative is out there. We've taken steps to address that growth, and we'll continue to do so. We've seen some positive steps in addressing that downtown, and I think we'll continue to see the fruits of those labors going forward. But where we sit right now, we don't have a positive growth. I mean, that's just plain and simple. There's no two ways about it. You know, so the question becomes, all right, is it fiscally responsible to the taxpayer to say, we're going to go with the max tax rate even though the tax base is not growing? My philosophical thinking on this, as I said, and again, this is not pen to paper, but this is just philosophically, is that governance should match the community, and governance should be tied to the community. If the community is not growing, then I think that needs to come into our thinking when we set these rates. We've got taxpayers, obviously, that have higher inflation, that the cost of that they're absorbing. We've all seen it if you've paid an insurance bill lately, if you've paid utility bills, if you pay, you know, the cost of everything is just more. And so I think we need to keep that in mind. You know, we've really just kind of looked at, I guess, in this exercise, the max rate, which we now understand that that's what's being thrown out there, the no new revenue rate. From my thinking, if that's a binary choice between I'm doing one of those or the other, then I would lean toward the latter, quite frankly. You know, if coming out of this meeting, and I would understand if it was, but if coming out of this meeting that there's approval for the max rate, then I would hope that that wouldn't be set in stone, that we could continue discussions about, okay, what does that look like? Is there a way that we can get to still fulfill our promises that we've made to public safety, to our first responders, but be sensitive to you know, our taxpayers and consider something other than the max rate. Now, having said that, again, I fully understand the concept behind it, I understand the reason behind it, but I want everybody to at least, I wanted to vocalize that, so we at least have that on the table in discussion. And so I'm happy to hear any other comments or concerns or issues. You know, again, I fully understand the max rate based on the economics, based on the math, based on all the all the things that go into that. But I don't think it should be lost that there are other factors beyond just the numbers on the page that need to come into play here. So
I think I share your opinion, and I want to add to that, that not only
Can
are
you
we
speak into
looking
the
at-
microphone, please?
Yeah, I share that opinion, but I want to add to that, that not only do we need to look at it from a residential perspective, but from a business perspective as well, from the commercial increase, because we do see that that's where there will be an increase. They will see that, that overall, there has been that commercial increase. And I just want to clarify again that because I need that clarification as a somewhat new at this point council member, that should this be agreed upon and that we vote in favor of this, that this does not set this in stone. I just want that assurance that this is something that we can work on. And then I guess my next question to that would be, when would we work on that?
well, that would be something that would be done over the course of the next 30 days.
Okay.
Further discussion to determine, okay, is there something else? And if there may not be. I mean, that's just the reality of that. There may not be.
Right.
I would like to at least make a comment about your comment about the commercial values. Quite honestly, if you look at commercial values in the past, I see the commercial values going up as an adjustment to what's been a lag in those commercial values in the past. Now, I know business owners and commercial property owners may not agree with me, but that's just the facts. In reality is that I think we did see a lag, as Mr. Garza referred to. We saw residential and commercial go in a different direction for several years in there, which made no sense. And I think we're finally seeing commercial values catch up to probably what they should have been doing previously, at least in my mind. So,
During Mr. Garza's presentation, he did make a comment. I'm going to editorialize this part of it, that the numbers that he worked from were a point in time. The comment that he made was that there was growth, that growing Victoria was having an impact, and that some of that may be reflected. And so that's just, I recognize and appreciate your comments and your thoughts, but they're all based on numbers at a period in time that hopefully are going to change and continue to grow.
good.
And just really quick, we can discuss it however you wish, right? I mean, if there's a specific, I guess, let me backtrack. It would be helpful to me to get some direction from council, right? I mean, I recognize that approving, if you will, the proposed tax rate is not the final tax rate, and you're correct, Councilman Butler, that's the case. But in the absence of specific direction, right, I have nothing to go off of to know how to prepare, what to prepare leading up to whatever discussion you want to have. And so if council does want to, let's say, entertain options that aren't the voter approval tax rate, regardless of whether you needing to approve that tonight just for conversation's sake, I still need direction on what you want to see, what you want to explore.
No, and I think that's fair. And I'll point out too, and I will say this, I know that we have had mayors in the past, I'm thinking specifically, I believe, of Mayor McCoy, who kind of had the concept of throw out the max rate, put that out as a proposed rate, and then figure it out in the interim, which, that was kind of the approach that through that, I don't know if administration is the right word, but that was the approach that was taken. We haven't done that in recent years, and not that Raleigh passed away terribly long ago, but primarily because we haven't been in the same kind of situation because of the lack of growth and things of that nature. So that's why I say, I fully understand the proposal at the max rate, and if that is what comes out of this meeting, which would make sense, then I think there at least needs to be some discussion in the interim to Mr. Garza about, okay, if we're not going with the max rate, what rate is sustainable? What still gets us to accomplish our objectives based on what we have in the budget itself? I think it's at least worth a discussion, and whether that's done through one-on-ones, whether that's done through, whatever, I think I would like those discussions to at least take place going forward.
Sorry. Gilbert's, doing his thing. So Gilbert's and sorry we're having this discussion sort of live, but Gilbert is, I guess, suggesting that normally when we propose this tax rate at this juncture, that it's not an actual vote, that it's basically just presenting the tax rate to sort of publish that as the proposed tax rate.
Okay.
That the vote doesn't come until you actually consider the ordinance. We're trying to kind of confirm here on the fly how we've approached this particular meeting in the past to confirm that sentiment, but that's the side conversation that's happening right now. We don't want to necessarily put you in a position to vote on this if that's not what needs to happen. I understand that it's posted as a resolution, which obviously gives the look or the optics that it's something that needs to be passed. But if that was an oversight on our part in how we posted it, then we need to clarify that right now. And so April, I don't know if you can help do some research to kind of,
It was posted the same way last year.
and it was voted on last year?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not a tax vote. You're correct about that.
Yeah.
It's
Pushing it
it's a
to discussion.
it's a proposed
The
rate.
tax vote comes when you have your ordinance vote.
Correct.
This just puts it out there to start conversation.
That's correct.
Okay. Sorry about that, but thank you for confirming and clarifying.
Mr. Lofgren, you look like you're contemplating.
I understand your concerns, and it should be discussed. The point is, the compensation committee, part of us giving raises to police and fire is predicated on this. And in fact, if you go back to that slide, there's 8 things, I believe, on the slides. 2 of them have asterisks because 2 of them have not happened yet. If they do not happen, we will end up with a shortfall. So nobody wants to raise anybody's taxes. Even if we're doing well, I wouldn't want to raise everybody's taxes. And I think we should have a discussion on it. But I think it's necessary for the public safety raises. And we've been behind the 8 ball for a while. So this is a chance to get to where we need to be.
All right. Like I said, I understand the reason, I understand the logic behind it. I get it, yeah. All right.
So what is the expectation that council has of me and staff moving forward on this topic?
I mean,
Feel
I would like to see the budget impact of a rate other than the maximum rate. What does that do to the budget? What does that do to some of the things that you laid out this evening?
Right.
Are we cutting, are we moving people, are we reducing programs, services? That's the kind of thing that I would want to know on something other than the rate that's on the table right now.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
And I agree.
Yeah, and I would echo that from the standpoint that, again, I understand why the max rate's being proposed. I completely get it, and if I was on that side versus this side, I'd be doing the same thing you're doing. You're being responsible, doing your job to the city, and I completely understand that. My question would be along the line of Mr. Kidder's question is there some rate somewhere between these two that hits in a spot that we can still fulfill our commitment for that, because those need to happen. I mean, there's no doubt they have to be in there. Is there a rate that still hits that commitment? And what is the impact of I think we need to ask, what is the impact of that rate down the road as well? I mean, we need to know, not just what it is right now, but what is it down the road, and make a decision based off of that.
I think you're kind of asking Mr. Garza to come back with, well, if I come up with a lower rate, these are the things that I'm going to have to cut. I mean, that's the only substantial way that he can tell us the impact on the budget.
I think you're making an assumption that there would have to be cuts. I think we can be more aggressive with some of our budgeting, particularly on the sales tax side. We can look at perhaps not additions at this point in terms of new positions, things of that. I mean, I'm spitballing here, you know, things of that nature. I mean, I think it's worth a discussion, and it's worth exploring to say, hey, is there something there that still gets us to meet what our primary objective through this budget is, which quite frankly, this is a very heavy public safety centric budget. And we committed to do those things, and we need to do those things.
So you mean like possibly finding other revenue sources?
No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that we can look at adjusting our budget numbers based upon perhaps less conservative estimates on sales tax. That's not another revenue source. That's just an adjustment of what you think is bringing, right? So I think things along those lines are really what I'm talking about. And I see Mr. Rainey nodded his head at me as if he'd say, okay, I get what you're asking. And so hopefully that message comes through. But again, I think the purpose of tonight is to set a proposed rate that we can then work off of for the next 30 days.
And it's something that we can come back to discuss at the next council meeting. And so it's not anything that we need to have to wait till next month. And so we would be ready and prepared to share some of this additional information as soon as our next council meeting.
Right. No, and I think that would be appropriate.
And I guess, just also, I guess Mr. Kidder said too, the impact of the different rate, the impact of this rate, or the impact of the different rate going forward in terms of tax value, not tax values, but rates with the new cap.
Yeah, so
That's easy to do.
Crystal ball.
Yeah,
basically.
that'd be nice if I had one. But yeah, I'm basically envisioning presenting the information to you in two ways. One, solely focused on impact of recurring revenue now and moving forward to kind of illustrate, you know, impact of the compounding effect or lack thereof, right? And then second, show you some examples of if we did make a change, what would actually change, you know, in the actual proposed budget, whether that be increasing sales tax revenue to make up for any decrease on the property tax side, or whether that be a combo of that plus, you know, reducing some expenditures. So that's how I envision, you know, presenting that update to you at the next council meeting.
Well, another thing that needs to be brought up, and once we raise people's salaries in police and fire, they're in this step thing, so there's automatically going to be increases that go in the future. So if you're not increasing your reoccurring revenue, then you're going to have to make it up again somewhere else. So it's important that we look at that too. I mean, it's easy to, it's not a one-time expense. It's an expense that's going to grow over time. So how are we going to grow that over time?
Which looking back at that and seeing what that compounded amount would have been was important to me to have you speak to.
Yeah, and we can show that, you know, and that's actually why I included the slide too on ongoing goals of the committee, right? Because I think in order to have a true discussion on the long-term implications of the decision, we're gonna have to make some assumptions, right? I'm gonna have to paint a picture to you on what does this look like if next year we have another flat year? What does this look like if we have flat values for the next 2 years? What does this look like if we actually want to be more aggressive with general population? How much does it cost to do a 2% or 3% across the board increase in pay for general population, right? I mean, I think it would behoove us, if we really want to go down that path, to really take into account some assumptions, both on the revenue side and on the expense side, because otherwise we're just shooting blind, right? And so if you're comfortable with us making some assumptions like that are multi-year assumptions for the sake of conversation, I think that'd be the best way to go. And that'd be the only way, I think, to illustrate the impact of the compounding effect or lack thereof.
Joe, I think you're exactly right. I think you have to make some assumptions.
You're right.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And I think that's really important. And that slide where you showed where everybody is, they're hurting for taxes and they've got to raise it is because they didn't take into account the further expenses that they were going to incur. And I think that's really important when we're sitting here in a council. We're not just budgeting and it drops off. We've got reoccurring expenses that are going to get, the fire department expenses are going to go up. The police is going to go up. So when we do the tax rate, it's not just, we could cut stuff out and lower the tax rate, but we need to understand the reoccurring things that we have going. And not just personnel, the cost of things. If cost of chemicals go up, if cost of doing a street goes up, I'm not for raising people's taxes. If I could avoid it, I would. If we had growth, we could cover it up. We don't have growth. But we do have to take into account, we have to give people the services and try and have enough fire and police to service the city. And the only way we can do that is if we pay them more, and with that comes reoccurring expenses. So I just want to make sure that that's considered in the conversation.
Oh, I think it has to be, absolutely. Yeah, no, thank you for that.
Okay.
All right.
And we also need to know what CIP projects might have to be pushed back or scaled back, i.e. community center in the future, if there's that big word, if worse comes to worse.
Well, one thing to keep in mind too is that whenever we're talking about expenditures is that there's a big difference between recurring expenditures and CIP centric, right? So for example, the money that we're proposing to put towards the community center is not money that you can use to pay employees, right? And so not all money is created equal. And so our intent for purposes of this conversation is going to be solely focused on the recurring side of it, because that's the only way to truly compare apples to apples in trying to forecast something out. Now, if there was an option for us to move money from the INS rate to the M&O rate, then what you just suggested would be absolutely applicable.
Yeah,
but currently, we cannot move money from the INS rate to the M&O rate without it working against the cap. So delaying CIP projects or not issuing as much debt on the CO side wouldn't really do anything to the M&O side at this point, the way that SB2 is structured.
I'm going to ask a question that I don't think it's possible, but you said there would be no bond redemption. And the bond rate went up a little bit too. Okay, the INS rate went up a little bit too. Could money be used to redeem bonds from another part of the city's budget?
Yes.
That's lower the INS rate?
I don't know if it would lower the INS rate, but we can use money.
It wouldn't until the future.
Yeah, but we can use money from anywhere to pay that off. It doesn't have to come from the INS rate for the bond redemption.
All right, any further discussion?
Okay, let's go back to the INS rate for a minute. We're going to do bonds for the community center, right?
Yes.
Now, that money's not going to be spent for a while, right? We're not actually going to pay a contractor for a while, right? Now, we're either going to gain interest on that?
So the community center is a little tricky because we basically the funding structure to pay for those COs is being absorbed by the South Sacs Development Corporation for the first few years. And so you may recall that when we developed the financing mechanism for community center, we basically showed you that we're going to see a reduction in debt service payments in 2030.
Okay, I got you.
And so what we basically proposed was let's issue some debt now for the project. South Sacs Development Corporation, who's contributing $5 to $6 million towards the project, will use that $5 or $6 million to make that payment over the first 3 or 4 years. And then in 2030, or 31, one of those, the INS rate starts to pick it up with no impact to the rate because we would have finished paying off some debt.
Okay. But the bond will be, we won't pay, we'll have this money from the bond, which won't go to paying off the contractors for a while, right? It will earn interest somewhere? Is that
Well,
not-
there's the possibility for that, but keep in mind the construction schedule for community center is for it to start construction in March of '26. So there's not going to be money sitting around for a while. I mean, we're on a timetable with the project that construction would start next calendar year and be completed by early part of '27. So there isn't a bunch of money that's just sitting there. And we can't even do that anyway.
Yeah. And we've already assumed, I think, $1.5 million in interest income from those funds to go towards that project.
That was part of the funding?
Are you
Or the whole-
trying to identify money for a bond redemption?
Yeah, because I'd like to lower that rate increases the tax for taxpayers too. And if I can lower the debt rate, I can lower the tax rate for people just as, because the M&O, we need the money in the M&O part. And if we could lower the INS rate, it would
Sure.
still lower their taxes.
It offsets.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why
I guess that's
I'm
the
reaching,
that's
I'm
the
reaching
connection.
here. I'm
Yeah.
trying to find,
Yeah, I guess back to Ricky's point, that would be the connection, right? I mean, we wouldn't be able to move money from the INS rate, like literally, to the M&O rate. But if you bought down the INS rate,
exactly,
it would offset the increase on the M&O side,
right,
is what you're suggesting.
yes.
Yeah. In theory,
just a
that could
thought.
work, but it takes a while for that to
Yeah, I know. It
to hit.
takes- Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. So anyway, but that's
Okay.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. No, we need to, this is the kind of discussions we need to have on this. So are there any other questions? Because what's before us at this point is a motion and a second for proposing the max rate, which as we discussed, if we want to look at other options, would be the rate that we would work off of. Correct? Everybody's clear on that? That's not a final vote. That's just a proposed rate. Okay? All right. So given that then, all in favor of that proposed rate, say aye.
Aye.
I will vote no. I'll be the one no vote. 5-1. 5-1. Okay. I understand we do not have an executive session,
That's correct.
and so we are out at 7:46.